Chapter 1356, Emerging from Seclusion, A Fierce Battle Intensifies, Part 1. Chapter 1356, Emerging from Seclusion, A Fierce Battle Intensifies, Part 1. Within the loose cultivator alliance. Inside Jiang Chengxuan's secluded chamber. In the vast alchemy room, a strange and wondrous sight filled the air. Ethereal visions of celestial mountains and rivers shimmered in the void, as though an entire world had manifested in the space. A tranquil river flowed, and mountains bathed in divine sunlight rose, surrounded by mist and clouds. The scene was so lifelike, one could hear birds singing and sea serpents slithering among the trees. Even more remarkable, these illusions moved with a rhythm of their own, sometimes stretching, sometimes contracting, as if unseen hands were guiding their flow. In reality, this miraculous display was the result of flames burning within the room. The space was filled with an endless sea of alchemical fire. These flames, undoubtedly controlled by Jiang Chengxuan, radiated from the center, where the towering mountain and river furnace glowed a deep crimson. The furnace was fueled to its utmost capacity by Jiang Chengxuan's immortal energy. For days without rest, Jiang Chengxuan had been solely focused on refining a vast quantity of pills. His goal was to complete this process in one sitting, to ensure he wouldn't need to be distracted later by further alchemical tasks or unexpected interruptions. Since the day he began his secluded session, the mountain and river furnace had burned ceaselessly, with its entire structure now gleaming with a nearly transparent brilliance. The fragrant aroma of countless medicinal herbs permeated every corner of the room, as though it had seeped into the walls and floor itself. "Rise." At a certain moment, Jiang Chengxuan, still seated amidst the roaring alchemical flames, softly commanded, his eyes snapping open and sending a ripple through the air. His hands moved fluidly, forming dozens of seals in the blink of an eye, each striking the furnace with resounding force. The mountain and river furnace responded instantly, emitting a brilliant flash of divine light that shot toward the heavens. The illusions of mountains and rivers twisted and contorted wildly in the space around the furnace, taking on a more profound and mystical appearance. Within the light, a single streak of multicolored brilliance soared into the air, accompanied by a thunderous boom. This speck of radiant light descended slowly into Jiang Chengxuan's awaiting hands. "Few euros." Seeing the fruit of his labor in hand, Jiang Chengxuan let out a long breath, his tense expression easing. Gently, he lifted the newly refined pill between his fingers and examined it for a few moments before retrieving a five-colored box. As the box opened, a powerful aura surged forth, filled with the essence of pure origin energy. Inside the box lay a collection of pills, each gleaming with an otherworldly glow, unmistakably extraordinary in quality. These pills were the culmination of Jiang Chengxuan's secluded refinement process. He had poured all the remaining primordial energies and rare ingredients into them, ensuring that they would suffice even if the Great Tribulation lasted for tens of thousands of years. As the furnace's brilliance gradually dimmed, and the flames began to die down, a ripple of energy pulsed through the protective formation surrounding Jiang Chengxuan's chamber, manifesting as a beam of light that swiftly flew toward him. Unperturbed, Jiang Chengxuan's expression remained calm. With a slight gesture, he caught the incoming light, which revealed itself to be a message transmission imbued with the aura of Shen Ruyan. "It's just a message from Ruyan," Jiang Chengxuan muttered softly as he opened the transmission. "Husband, important events have occurred in Jiangsu. Rumors are spreading of an immortal treasure's emergence. I have already departed to investigate and have brought enough people. Do not worry." The message was brief, but upon reading it, Jiang Chengxuan's brows furrowed in thought, his expression becoming serious. An immortal treasure had appeared. Such news was far from a cause for celebration. In the immortal realm, 7 or 8 out of every 10 conflicts could be traced back to disputes over treasures or fortuitous opportunities. The term treasure was often more synonymous with peril than with opportunity. Furthermore, Shen Ruyan's message specifically mentioned an immortal treasure, which heightened Jiang Chengxuan's concern. For news of a Jiangsu treasure to reach even Shen Ruyan in Zizhu meant one of two things. Either the treasure was closely linked to the loose cultivator alliance, or the secret of its existence had already spread far and wide, making it common knowledge. This, in turn, signaled even greater danger. From this short message, Jiang Chengxuan could already deduce that intense battles had likely erupted in Jiangsu between various factions. The implications were clear. "I have a bad feeling about this," Jiang Chengxuan murmured to himself, feeling a persistent sense of unease. "Let me divine the situation." Without hesitation, Jiang Chengxuan summoned a circular celestial artifact of Euros, the heavenly Tao Compass of Euros, into his hand. His immortal energy surged, activating the divination powers of the artifact. As the energy gathered, it formed a vortex that enveloped him. Jiang Chengxuan sat cross-legged once more, sending the compass floating above his head. A soft light descended from the compass, shrouding his figure in a veil of mist. As the power of divination deepened, the threads of fate hidden within the heavens began to reveal themselves, connecting the lines of causality that would illuminate the path ahead. Chapter 1357, Emergence from Seclusion, The Battle Intensifies, Part 2. Chapter 1357, Emergence from Seclusion, The Battle Intensifies, Part 2. Within the chaotic sea of karma, Jiang Chengxuan's consciousness slowly descended into the depths. Before him lay a dazzling and turbulent ocean, where multicolored waves surged, casting forth shimmering black bubbles. In an instant, countless transformations occurred, each representing the current, past, or future events of the immortal domain. An ordinary cultivator would quickly lose their sanity if they were to glimpse even a fragment of this scene. Every inch of this space held boundless information, incomprehensible to the untrained mind. However, for Jiang Chengxuan, the art of celestial divination had long become second nature. Especially now, as he had advanced to the mid-stage of Earth immortal cultivation, his sensitivity to the workings of the heavens had grown sharper, making his divinations nearly effortless. Encased in the power of heavenly tribulation divination, Jiang Chengxuan's consciousness spread out like a vast net, encompassing a portion of the web of karma and recording every minute change within. In a short time, the vague sense of unease in his heart solidified into concrete information and guidance, revealing the truth he sought. "So that's how it is. This treasure's emergence is far from simple," Jiang Chengxuan murmured after some time, rising from his seated position. He gathered the divination powers and solemnly reflected on what he had uncovered. This event in the Middle Continent may very well be the spark that ignites the great calamity of the immortal domain. Through his divination, Jiang Chengxuan realized the inevitable Euros. The long-anticipated, once-in-a-million-year calamity of the immortal domain was finally upon them. The appearance of the mysterious treasure seemed to be the catalyst. In his vision, Jiang Chengxuan saw rivers of blood flowing across the battlefield of the Middle Continent. Countless forces clashed, their fates entwined and mangled. Some were burned, others were severed, and many more were corroded, each symbolizing the disastrous fate awaiting them. Amidst it all, a massive black storm loomed, preparing to erupt from the battlefield. Even Jiang Chengxuan, from the safety of his seclusion, felt insignificant in the face of this impending force. The storm signified only one thing, the heavenly tribulation. Jiang Chengxuan sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the gravity of what he had seen. However, instead of succumbing to fear or despair, he remained calm. Because in the midst of the destruction, he also saw opportunity. One opportunity in particular was connected to his beloved wife, Shen Ruyan. Jiang Chengxuan could sense that her chance to break through to the Earth immortal stage was hidden within this tribulation. For that reason, Jiang Chengxuan decided not to recall Shen Ruyan and the others just yet. An opportunity to ascend to the Earth immortal realm was exceedingly rare Euros, perhaps only once in tens of thousands of years. It was worth the risks, even if some sacrifices had to be made along the way. Rumble. Without further hesitation, Jiang Chengxuan waved his hand, opening the grand doors of his secluded chamber. Outside, several elders of the Loose Cultivator Alliance were waiting for him. As soon as they saw Jiang Chengxuan's figure emerge, expressions of joy lit up their faces, and they hurried forward to greet him. "Congratulations on completing your seclusion, Elder Jiang. Your cultivation has clearly advanced even further Euros. This is truly a cause for celebration," they said, bowing respectfully. Jiang Chengxuan nodded slightly in acknowledgement, but quickly cut to the matter at hand. "I am already aware of the situation in the Middle Continent. Has there been any new information?" The elders, sensing the seriousness of his inquiry, immediately straightened their expressions. "Elder Jiang, Elder Shen and her party left several days ago, but we have not yet received any updates from them. Time is of the essence. I must head to the middle continent at once. Spread the word throughout the alliance, as well as to our allies. The great calamity may soon descend. Advise everyone to begin preparations immediately. Hearing this, the elders were momentarily shocked. The news of the great calamity was earth-shattering. Their eyes widened, and a sense of dread gripped their hearts. The immortal domain calamity Euros, was it really happening? Such a proclamation wasn't something Jiang Chengxuan would utter lightly. And based on their unwavering trust in him, the elders understood the gravity of his words. Without hesitation, they accepted his orders and moved to take action. Understood. We will begin preparations immediately, they declared resolutely before bowing and hurrying off to spread the word throughout the alliance. Jiang Chengxuan watched them leave, his mind already focused on the next steps. He summoned a surge of immortal energy and transformed into a streak of light, racing toward the middle continent. Meanwhile, at the ruins of the flowing cloud Immortal Valley in the middle continent, the battle had reached its peak. After several days of fierce conflict, no cultivator had yet succeeded in penetrating the 1,000-mile cloud waterfall that had emerged from the valley. The battlefield surrounding the waterfall had turned into a chaotic void, scarred by the remnants of countless clashes. The once pristine landscape had collapsed into ruin, leaving only fragmented floating islands drifting aimlessly in the void. These islands, like strange meteors, floated amidst the cosmic storm, while countless figures darted between them, firing blasts of radiant energy at shadows of their foes. By now, the battle had devolved into a free-for-all. Alliances were forgotten, and every cultivator who approached was treated as an enemy, no matter their origin. Anyone attempting to make a dash for the cloud waterfall was immediately set upon by the surrounding forces. Many had already perished in their reckless bids to seize the treasure, their bodies torn apart by the combined attacks of their rivals. This brutal display had instilled a cautious, but intense vigilance in the surviving combatants. None dared make another reckless charge until the situation further developed. Take Thesaurus, primordial divine lightning. On one of the larger floating islands, Shen Ruyan and the other members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance had gathered, holding their ground. Facing an incoming shadowy figure, Shen Ruyan's eyes flashed with the light of primordial power. She raised her hands, summoning a torrent of primordial divine lightning that surged through the air like a river of blinding light, tearing through the void as it raced toward her opponent. Ayan. The unfortunate cultivator who had dared to challenge Shen Ruyan paid a steep price. The divine lightning, so powerful that it could erase both void and chaos itself, engulfed the enemy's figure in a single instant. Boom! With a deafening thunderclap, the enemy's towering form shattered, reduced to countless fragments of debris that scattered into the void. This opponent had been a true immortal-level cultivator, yet in just a single exchange, Shen Ruyan had destroyed his astral form and gravely injured him. Nearby cultivators were left stunned by this display of power. They quickly took note of Shen Ruyan's position, making a mental note to avoid her group at all costs. HMPH. Shen Ruyan remained composed after her decisive strike, showing neither triumph nor bloodlust. Behind her, the other members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance and the Dragon Chamber of Commerce stood firm, their auras restrained as they refrained from launching further attacks. Having fought continuously for days, they had already clashed with numerous factions, winning every battle. However, their enemies seemed endless, and no matter how many they felled, more appeared to take their place. Recognizing the futility of an all-out offensive, Shen Ruyan had ordered her forces to adopt a more defensive strategy. They had occupied the largest of the floating islands, keeping a watchful eye on the battlefield and only intervening when other forces attempted to make a move on the treasure. For now they waited, prepared to act when the time was right. Chapter 1358. All sides take action, the true battle begins, Part 1. Chapter 1358. All sides take action, the true battle begins, Part 1. At the ruins of the flowing cloud, Immortal Valley. In the vast, empty battleground, streams of divine light and immortal energy surged like roaring dragons. Blinding flashes of celestial light frequently erupted within the void, their brilliance and destructive force radiating for miles. This once pristine battlefield had now become submerged in a sea of chaotic energy. Numerous figures, each an immortal, moved like specters amidst the dense fog, unleashing their divine abilities and engaging in relentless combat. Some wielded treasures, like a West Continent cultivator holding a tower to suppress a whole region. Others controlled elements, like an East Continent cultivator manipulating extreme ice to freeze hundreds of miles. The chaos of the Xianxia immortal realm was beyond description, as countless sects had joined the fray, creating a scene akin to a gathering of vengeful spirits. The once clear skies were now filled with endless slaughter. Among the carnage, the floating islands within the void were littered with the skeletal remains of fallen immortals. Yet instead of instilling fear, these grim scenes only fueled the thirst for battle. I can sense something, as if something is deliberately stirring this desire for destruction, Shen Ruyan murmured from her vantage point on one of the massive floating land fragments. Her words made the gathered elders behind her fall into contemplative silence. By all logic, this battle should have already reached its peak and begun to subside. As more immortals fell, some factions should have realized that they were out of their league and chosen to withdraw. Yet this was not the Xianxia Euros. No matter how many died, the combatants continued fighting with no sign of retreat. It defied reason, and this abnormality had raised Shen Ruyan's concerns. "I wonder if my husband has emerged from his seclusion yet," she said, her voice betraying a rare trace of worry, causing the gathered elders to pause. The madness of the battlefield unsettled many, but at the mention of Jiang Chengxuan, a sense of calm washed over them. It was as though no matter how dire the situation became, the mere thought of Jiang Chengxuan joining the fray was enough to dispel any fear or doubt. "Shen Elder, it seems those other major forces are starting to make their move," one of the elders monitoring the battlefield reported, tension creeping into his voice. All eyes turned toward the battlefield, and Shen Ruyan's gaze followed. She saw activity on the largest of the floating landmasses scattered across the void. Besides their own forces, there were three other powerful factions, each as formidable as the loose cultivator alliance. These forces had been biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, a strange ripple of power erupted in the distance, catching Shen Ruyan's attention. A terrifying force surged, tearing through the void and creating a whirlwind. From the heart of this maelstrom, a yellow wind emerged, swirling upward to form a massive pillar that tore through everything in its path. Within moments, several unsuspecting immortals were caught in its grasp. Their screams echoed as they were devoured by the yellow wind. Despite their attempts to resist with their divine power and principles, they were quickly overwhelmed. Golden lines began to spread across their bodies, and within a few breaths, they were transformed into golden statues of Euros, eerily lifelike but forever frozen. "That power, it must be the Xianxia immortal sect," one of the elders from the Loose Cultivator Alliance exclaimed, recognizing the force responsible. A heavy atmosphere settled over the group as their expressions grew grim. The Xianxia immortal sect was a top-tier faction from the northern continent of the Xianxia immortal realm, and it had its own earth immortal to back it up. Their signature ability, the golden wind of the Xianxia, was infamous. It could manipulate the metal energy within a person's body, disrupting their internal balance and ultimately transforming them into stone. "They're making their move." Before Shen Ruyan or the others could react further, the Xianxia immortal sect's disciples unleashed their full power. With unstoppable momentum, they charged toward the towering cloudfall that spanned thousands of miles, clearly intent on seizing the treasure hidden within. Boom! At that moment, before Shen Ruyan and her allies could intervene, another deafening explosion echoed from the opposite side of the battlefield. A brilliant beam of white light pierced through the darkness, spreading out like the tail of a peacock and illuminating the heavens. A mighty dragon's roar accompanied the white light, reverberating throughout the battlefield. A massive pale dragon, with 4 vast wings, each spanning hundreds of miles, emerged from the shadows and followed closely behind the Xianxia immortal sect's whirlwind. The dragon's colossal body shimmered with white celestial light, and it boasted 3 heads, each roaring ferociously as it tore through the void, smashing aside anything in its way. Its overwhelming presence radiated power approaching that of a peak true immortal, causing countless immortals on the battlefield to tremble in fear. Those unfortunate enough to be in its path were instantly crushed, their defensive golden bodies shattered into pieces, their remains raining down in a bloody mist. Chapter 1359, Forces Emerge, The True Battle Begins Part 2. Chapter 1359, Forces Emerge, The True Battle Begins Part 2. Xianxia Euros. A collective gasp filled the vast, void-like battlefield as the full weight of the top-tier sect's power was unleashed. At last, many of the cultivators began regaining their senses in the face of the overwhelming pressure. Their bodies trembled under the suffocating aura, forcing them to withdraw their immortal energies. Fear and confusion marked their expressions as they looked around at the battlefield littered with countless corpses. Several realized the peril they had long ignored and immediately chose to flee. HMPH. Old Taoists of the White Dragon Immortal Sect, you go too far, yelled one of the Yellow-Wind Immortal Sect's cultivators, hot on the heels of the colossal White Dragon. In response, the Yellow-Wind Immortal Sect disciples raised their hands, releasing brilliant golden light as they conjured powerful gusts of yellow wind, sending it hurtling toward the White Dragon. Enough with the nonsense, came a cold reply. Several figures emerged atop the massive White Dragon. Clad in white robes and wielding swords as clear as autumn water, these disciples of the White Dragon Immortal Sect, both old and young, exuded an indomitable aura. As the yellow wind approached, the white-robed cultivators deftly moved, stepping on the 8 trigrams, their bodies spinning like the wind. In an instant, they formed a mystical sword formation. Boom! Blinding white light erupted from their bodies as they swung their swords in unison, creating a brilliant white path through the void, slashing toward the oncoming yellow wind. Boom! Boom! The clash between the two great sects sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. Explosions of thunderous energy shook the heavens as one fierce collision gave birth to countless phenomena, each releasing an oppressive force. Waves of energy rippled outward, fracturing the very fabric of the void, shattering the floating islands beneath the feet of several nearby cultivators. Those who narrowly escaped these violent tremors fled in terror, barely avoiding a tragic end. "Elder, should we act now?" one of the loose cultivator alliance members asked eagerly, the tense atmosphere pushing them toward action as they stood behind Shen Ruyan. Shen Ruyan nodded, her eyes flashing with electricity. She understood that the major factions were beginning to make their moves. To seize the advantage, they couldn't afford to hesitate. Thunder command. Primordial divine lightning. Activate. In the next moment, Shen Ruyan unleashed a torrent of immortal energy. A token flew from her hand, rapidly expanding in the air before her. At the same time, a golden light shot from behind her, blooming into an immense wave of radiant power, swirling with demon force. Buzza Euros. As the space beneath their feet quaked, a golden figure suddenly rose from the floating island. Covered in shimmering scripture and emanating a powerful golden glow, it was none other than the golden cicada demon king, a creature Jiang Chengxuan had once subdued. This time, the demon king had followed Shen Ruyan into battle. Screeya Euros. Without a moment's hesitation, the demon king let out a sharp screech as Shen Ruyan directed it. The aura of a true immortal at its peak spread across the battlefield, intimidating all who sensed it. In an instant, the demon king mustered tremendous strength, carrying the group forward as it transformed into a bolt of golden light, streaked with lightning, charging toward the distant cloud waterfall. Shen Ruyan's intention wasn't to engage in battle. Her goal was to gain the upper hand. Quite the plan. But I won't let you have your way. As tensions mounted across the battlefield, it was only natural that other factions had their eyes on the loose cultivator alliance. Before the demon king could carry the group far, a voice rang out behind them, followed by a powerful attack. Purple streams of celestial energy, as dazzling as a galaxy, shot forth, enveloping them in an instant. Shen Ruyan didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, she raised her 5-thunder immortal-slaying sword, imbuing it with primordial divine lightning, and slashed forward. The primordial energy cleaved through the chaos, carving out a radiant path of 9-colored lightning. The terrifying power of the lightning, combined with the sharpness of her sword, collided violently with the incoming purple light. Boom! Boom! The air rippled with explosive energy as the currents of immortal power clashed. Shen Ruyan's lightning-infused slash tore through the purple light, continuing its advance. The attackers, undeterred, grunted as they unleashed several more layers of immortal energy and artifacts to meet the remaining force. With great effort, they managed to deflect the destructive force, though residual blasts of energy scattered like rain, crashing toward the demon king from behind. Prepare for battle. The loose cultivator alliance members could hold back no longer. The pent-up battle lust finally surged forth, and they launched themselves into the fray. Every cultivator who had embarked on the path of immortality had their own battle methods and philosophies. When cornered, they would meet danger head-on, embracing the mantra that only the brave could emerge victorious. In the eyes of Shen Ruyan's followers, there was nothing but the fiery determination of warriors. They drew their treasures and infused them with vast amounts of immortal power, conjuring an array of divine techniques that roared across the battlefield with terrifying might. Boom! Boom! The resulting clash erupted into an inferno of energy, sending waves of celestial power rippling across the void, shattering the surrounding space. Blades of divine energy, fierce as tigers, claws of thunder, breath of dragons, sword auras, and beams of light filled the sky, splitting it asunder. 20 cultivators had unleashed their full might, igniting the battlefield with unrelenting force. The impact was so fierce that many other nearby cultivators, realizing the danger, turned and fled. "Obstruct my path, and you shall fall today," Shen Ruyan declared coldly, ordering the Demon King to halt as she gathered her lightning energy and fearlessly charged into the fray. She knew that to deter the surrounding forces, she would have to prove her strength. Fear was the most effective deterrent, and strength was the only way to inspire it. Thunder Spirit War God. In a flash, Shen Ruyan transformed into a figure of lightning, streaking through the air to confront the approaching enemies. The cultivators of the Purple Star Immortal sect, dressed in purple robes adorned with celestial gems, stood in her path. The Purple Star Immortal sect was a high-ranking faction in the Heavenly Light Immortal domain, known for wielding cosmic starlight as a weapon in their powerful combat arts. But Shen Ruyan showed no fear. Her hands moved in a blur as she cast a series of complex seals. Before her enemies could react, two towering giants formed entirely from lightning rose behind her, each radiating an aura of supreme power. Like wrathful titans, the thunder giants surged forward alongside Shen Ruyan, tearing through the chaotic storm of energy and crushing down upon their enemies with a might that rivaled that of a peak true immortal. Suppress them. The cultivators of the Purple Star Immortal sect refused to back down. With a roar, they unleashed their celestial powers, calling upon the majestic force of their cosmic star techniques. Buzz-a-Euros. In an instant, the air around them shimmered with strange energy. Purple starlight filled the space behind them, illuminating the battlefield with a regal and overwhelming brilliance. Empowered by the starlight, their strength surged. Raising their immortal weapons, they counterattacked with all their might, meeting Shen Ruyan's thunderous onslaught head-on. Boom! Boom! The true battle had finally begun. On one side, the elite cultivators of the Loose Cultivator Alliance clashed fiercely with the formidable warriors of the Purple Star Immortal sect. Each fighter was a master in their own right, wielding artifacts of great power and unleashing their deadliest techniques. In the midst of it all, the golden cicada Demon King loomed, its massive form tearing through the battlefield as it clashed with the cosmic starlight summoned by the Purple Star cultivators. Every strike shook the heavens and earth, and countless onlookers trembled with fear. Chapter 1360, The Breaking Point, Entry of the Earth Immortals, Part 1. Chapter 1360, The Breaking Point, Entry of the Earth Immortals, Part 1. In a single instant, the actions of the Yellow Wind Immortal sect triggered a chain reaction, igniting the long-anticipated battle for the mysterious treasure hidden beyond the massive cloud waterfall. As Shen Ruyan and her group made their move, the vast void battlefield exploded with activity as numerous mid- to upper-tier forces clashed simultaneously. These sects had, until now, preserved most of their strength, sitting back on their floating islands, watching the smaller sects and minor forces fight to the death, awaiting the perfect moment to strike. Now that moment had come. Each faction sought to break the stalemate amidst the chaos and charge into the swirling cloud waterfall that stretched for thousands of miles. Thick clouds churned like titanic waves, and within those waves, rainbow-colored immortal light flickered, dancing like celestial dragons. The essence of the treasure's presence grew stronger and stronger, its aura piercing through the void, infiltrating the senses of everyone on the battlefield. It was a temptation that no one could resist. Where do you think you're going in such a rush? Heather, want to seize the initiative. Not before the cold voice Immortal Sect says so. Stop right now, or you'll be courting death. Booming voices echoed across the void, accompanied by thunderous explosions, throwing the battlefield into utter disarray. Boom! Boom! Endless flames surged into the sky as celestial bodies crumbled in the distance. Each faction commandeered a floating island, launching long-range attacks or stepping directly into enemy territory, plunging into bloody combat. Death thunder, primordial wind. Shenruyan herself had already infiltrated the ranks of the Purple Star immortal sect. Transformed into her thunder deity form, she wielded the laws of primordial wind with ease, cutting through the enemy lines as if they were nothing. The primordial divine lightning and primordial wind, powers on par with the forces of creation, outclassed even the formidable Purple Star immortal sect's celestial energy. Under the cover of the loose cultivator alliance's elite cultivators, Shenruyan led the charge, using the two wrathful thunder deities as her anchors, breaking through the opposition with every step. The Purple Star immortal sect disciples found themselves overwhelmed by her onslaught, their pressure mounting with each strike. Invoke the Purple Star path. 9 rotations of Purple Star. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the Purple Star immortal sect elders, with grim expressions, activated their celestial treasures. Using their combined power, they summoned a massive purple star spirit. Clad in the armor of a celestial official, it held a treasured sword in one hand and a dust whisk in the other. It was a towering figure, 1,000 feet tall, radiating a terrifying aura. Before it, the thunder deity Shenruyan had summoned appeared ordinary. In the next moment, under the guidance of the Purple Star Sex formation, the star spirit roared with divine fury, stepping through the void, brandishing its sword to strike at Shenruyan. Will assist. Loose Cultivator Alliance disciples swiftly responded, rallying their strength and shouting in unison. They formed a protective formation around Shenruyan, their combined celestial energy forming a massive torrent that shielded her. In an instant, 3 colossal forces collided violently, unleashing devastating energy across the battlefield. Purple star rivers blazed in the void, their light shattering the surrounding chaos. Primordial divine lightning, mixed with primordial wind, tore through the skies, forming a maelstrom that engulfed everything in its path. This clash between 2 top-tier sects was a terrifying sight, shaking the heavens and terrifying every cultivator who bore witness. Some of the smaller forces caught in the crossfire were instantly annihilated by the shockwaves, reduced to dust in a mere instant. Even those who had managed to defend themselves with their full strength could only hope to survive the onslaught by protecting their own lives, barely escaping with their bodies intact. Hiss, we'd best not covet this opportunity any longer. Even if we claim the treasure, we'd never live to enjoy it. More and more smaller factions came to this sobering realization as they beheld the awesome might of the battle. Compared to the powerhouses like the Loose Cultivator Alliance, they were little more than ants. The rush toward the treasure would be akin to offering themselves up as sacrifices. And so, many of the lesser sects turned tail and fled, unwilling to linger on the battlefield for even a moment longer. This retreat repeated itself across the battlefield, leading to a temporary lull as various factions pulled back. Let's go. Meanwhile, after a fierce clash with the Purple Star immortal sect that lasted for dozens of exchanges, the opposing side finally succumbed to the pressure, retreating in defeat under Shenruyan's unrelenting assault. A furious roar echoed through the void as the Purple Star disciples fled, their formation collapsing. They fled in shame, streaking across the battlefield like wounded beasts. Cowards! Running with your tails between your legs, laughable. Ignore them. Let's press forward. Shenruyan, her expression calm and composed, showed no intention of pursuing the retreating forces. This was no time for pride or grudge euros. The treasure beyond the cloud waterfall was what truly mattered. Buzz euros. In the next moment, the golden cicada demon king, its massive form pulsing with energy, began moving once again, carrying Shenruyan and her group. The demon king radiated like a miniature sun as it surged through the turbulent chaos, heading straight for the cloud waterfall that lay ahead. Shenruyan and her allies held their breath as they focused intently on the task at hand. Chapter 1361, The Breaking Point, Entry of the Earth Immortals, Part 2. Chapter 1361, The Breaking Point, Entry of the Earth Immortals, Part 2. As the battle raged on, a sense of inevitability descended upon the battlefield. The arrival of the Earth Immortals shattered all prior expectations. Shenruyan, along with the other participants, felt the weight of an overwhelming presence that shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation. The loose cultivator alliance had quickly gained the upper hand, thanks to the swift and powerful charge of the golden cicada demon king. However, just as they were about to break through the final barrier and reach the cloud waterfall hiding the treasure, the combined might of the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect and White Dragon Immortal Sect converged upon them. Loose Cultivator Alliance. How dare you, not content with your tyranny in the Western continent, intrude upon matters in the Central region? Shenruyan's path to victory was abruptly cut off as two fearsome auras erupted from behind them. She turned and saw the leaders of the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect and White Dragon Immortal Sect closing in, their intent: eliminate the threat posed by the Loose Cultivator Alliance before anyone could claim the treasure. In an instant, a fierce battle ensued. A three-headed white dragon roared, its form filling the skies, while a towering sandstorm conjured by the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect ravaged everything in its path. These fearsome entities, on the cusp of true immortal perfection, tore through the void, ripping open massive chasms and leaving devastation in their wake. Stop them! Defend with all your might! Shenruyan's voice rang out, calm yet commanding. The cultivators of the Loose Cultivator Alliance instantly obeyed, summoning every ounce of power they had. The Golden Cicada Demon King, leading the charge, unleashed its full might. Golden runes blazed across its body as it erected a shimmering barrier of divine light. Sacred chants echoed in the air, disrupting the very laws of the immortal realm. Having been nurtured by Jiang Chengxuan after its submission, the Golden Cicada Demon King had grown immensely in power, consuming countless divine pills to reach new heights. Now its sheer strength stunned even the mighty three-headed white dragon. Boom! 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 The Golden Cicada Demon King's divine power clashed with the golden winds of the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect, creating a spectacular explosion of light and sound. Both forces represented the pinnacle of the golden path of the Tao, and now they sought to prove their dominance over one another. The entire battlefield became a blinding, golden sun, with all sound drowned out by the constant clashing of metal. The reverberating clangs were relentless, echoing through the heavens as if 1,000 celestial hammers were beating in unison. Even the cultivators of the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect felt the oppressive weight of their own power being reflected back at them. HMPH. If you refuse to act with honor, don't blame us for showing no mercy. Shenruyan's eyes gleamed with fierce resolve. Summoning her innate primordial divine lightning and primordial wind, she unleashed a devastating storm of elemental force. Her fellow cultivators from the Loose Cultivator Alliance followed suit, hurling forth their most powerful techniques. The air rippled and warped under the intensity of the attack. The primordial divine lightning intertwined with the primordial winds, creating a storm of unimaginable power, which shot toward the white dragon's three heads. The white dragon responded with a thunderous roar, its three mouths unleashing torrents of sword energy. These streams of sword light, honed through countless millennia of cultivation, carried the force of billions of blades, each sharper than the last. Boom! 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 The sky exploded as the two forces collided, billions of sword lights clashing against the primordial storm. Each impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield, causing a light show that stretched for miles. Each spark of light was a mini-battle between lightning and sword intent, swirling into a cosmic tapestry of destruction. The scale of the battle was incomprehensible. Star after star seemed to explode in the distance as the sheer force of the collision tore the heavens apart. But the true terror was yet to come. Stop holding back. We must suppress them now. Don't show any mercy. Amid the chaos, the cultivators of the Yellow Wind Immortal Sect and White Dragon Immortal Sect roared in fury, throwing themselves into the fray. The White Dragon's scales cracked under the assault, but its fury only grew as it expanded in size, white light radiating from its body as it tore through the void. Meanwhile, Shenruyan summoned even more power, unleashing her divine lightning of life and death. With every gesture, her lightning crashed down like judgment from the heavens, obliterating everything in its path. The battle had reached a level of intensity unseen before, with all sides fighting for their lives. The loose cultivators and their enemies were locked in a stalemate, unable to break through each other's defenses. Any cultivator foolish enough to venture too close was instantly reduced to ashes. However, this battle was merely a prelude. Buzz euros. Out of nowhere, a phenomenon unfolded in the distant skies. 9 stars appeared, aligning into a celestial formation that spanned the heavens. The power of these stars surged across the void, their energy brimming with the unmistakable aura of earthly immortal might. The Earth Immortals are joining the fray. The word sent shockwaves through the battlefield. Every cultivator who heard them gasped in disbelief. The sheer weight of the revelation was enough to make even the most battle-hardened warriors falter. In the blink of an eye, the power of the 9 stars descended upon the battlefield, crushing the chaotic vortex that had formed from the true immortals' clash. Even Shen Ruyan and her allies, bolstered by the golden cicada demon king, faltered. The dragon, locked in battle with the demon king, let out a cry of pain as its scales were shattered, blood spilling like rain across the battlefield. The golden cicada demon king fared no better. Its golden light dimmed, the divine runes on its body flickering as it was forced to retreat. Earth Immortals, they've entered the fray much sooner than expected, Shen Ruyan murmured, her expression growing grave. The entrance of an earthly immortal was a game-changer, one that none of them had anticipated this soon. Chapter 1362, The Overbearing Elder Perilous Situation, Part 1. Chapter 1362, The Overbearing Elder Perilous Situation, Part 1. The sudden emergence of the Earth Immortal's power stunned the entire battlefield, casting it into a chilling silence. No matter if it was the White Dragon Immortal sect, the Yellow Wind Immortal sect, or any other sect present, every cultivator held their breath, not daring to make a sound. Rara euros. Only the 3-headed white dragon let out a pitiful howl, its anguished roar echoing across the heavens. Above the 9 skies, the once rampant immortal energy began to calm, as if an unseen hand was pressing down upon the chaos. "You youngsters, this place is beyond your reach," came a calm yet commanding voice as a figure slowly appeared in the sky, catching the gaze of every immortal present. All eyes turned to the newcomer. Clad in a peculiar straw cloak and wearing a wide-brimmed hat, the elderly man looked more like an unremarkable fisherman than a powerful figure. His appearance was plain and ordinary, but those attuned to the Tao could feel Ida euros. His mere presence was enough to still the laws of heaven and earth, as if nature itself bent to his will. There was no doubt that this was an Earth Immortal. "Honored one, why would you, a being of such exalted status, compete with us juniors for this opportunity?" said one of the true immortals from the White Dragon Immortal sect, his face tense as he bowed, trying to maintain composure. Beside him, the once mighty 3-headed white dragon lay battered and bloodied, its scales cracked and bleeding from the Earth Immortal's earlier strike. Despite his fury at the treatment of his sect's prized beast, the true immortal could only voice his displeasure in words, unable to retaliate. "Isn't this action a bit too overbearing, honorable elder?" added the leader of the Yellow Wind Immortal sect, stepping forward in solidarity. While the appearance of the Earth Immortal had shocked them all, the leaders of these top-tier sects still retained a shred of courage. After all, their respective ancestors were also Earth Immortals, and they believed that their elders wouldn't sit idly by if things went too far. Though there was tension in the air, mere words weren't likely to lead to fatal consequences. "HMPH," the elder snorted, his eyes narrowing. "This treasure is far beyond your comprehension. For you juniors to take it would be a waste of its power. My actions are merely a warning. Leave now, and I will not pursue the matter." His calm voice was infused with an undeniable authority. His gaze shifted to the leaders of the Yellow Wind and White Dragon sects, causing both men to freeze in place, cold sweat beading on their foreheads. They had been prepared to argue further, but under the weight of his gaze, they found themselves tongue-tied, unable to speak. This was the oppressive might of an Earth Immortal. Even without raising a hand, he could dominate the minds and bodies of true immortals with just a look. The battlefield, once filled with chaos and destruction, fell into a heavy silence. It was as if the earth-shattering battle moments ago had been nothing but an illusion. The elder stepped forward, his eyes sweeping across the remaining forces still hesitating in the void. A chill ran down the spines of those under his gaze, as though they were being suffocated by an immense, unseen pressure. "Forgive us. We'll leave immediately. Honored elder, we dare not linger. Farewell." The unspoken threat in his gaze shattered any lingering hope. In a flurry of panic, sects and cultivators alike began to retreat, bowing respectfully before fleeing. One by one, black clouds of retreating cultivators fled the scene, like flocks of crows scattering in fear. While they might have been willing to risk their lives for the treasure against other true immortals, the arrival of an Earth immortal made it clear that staying would be suicide. Those without the backing of an Earth immortal in their own sex had no illusions about their chances of survival. In the blink of an eye, the once crowded battlefield beneath the 1,000-mile cloud waterfall had thinned considerably. Only a handful of sects remained, still weighing their options. HMPH. Are you all really so stubborn that you won't give up until you're dead? The Earth Immortal Elder spoke again, his voice now carrying a tangible weight. Taking another step forward, his aura fully unfolded, no longer restrained. The power of an Earth Immortal descended upon the battlefield like a mountain, pressing down on everyone present. It was as though the heavens themselves had grown heavy, and the remaining cultivators felt their bodies buckle under the immense pressure. Some, unable to withstand it, collapsed to their knees, trembling and straining with all their might, but unable to rise. The humiliation of being forced to kneel made their faces flush red with rage, but the overwhelming force left them powerless to resist. Even the cultivators of the White Dragon and Yellow Wind sects, who prided themselves on their strength, could not hold out. Their bodies groaned under the pressure, their bones creaking as they fought to remain standing. Yet inch by inch, they were being forced to bow. Among those resisting was Xianxia, and her forces from the Loose Cultivator Alliance. Her alliance members gritted their teeth, struggling to maintain their stance under the crushing pressure. Only Xianxia herself, fortified by her connection to the primordial Tao, was able to stand her ground, though even she felt the immense strain. Chapter 1363. The Overbearing Elder Perilous Situation, Part 2. Chapter 1363. The Overbearing Elder Perilous Situation, Part 2. The oppressive atmosphere on the battlefield intensified as the Earth Immortal Elder continued his tyrannical ways, crushing even the mighty White Dragon Immortal Sect's three-headed dragon, which let out a final agonizing roar before plummeting from the sky. The enormous body of the dragon, along with a few of the sect's disciples, disappeared into the depths of the battlefield. With a cold snort, the Elder finally withdrew his overwhelming pressure, leaving the remaining true immortals drenched in sweat and filled with fear. Every one of them cast wary glances at the Elder, realizing how close they had come to death. "Senior Shen, what should we do now?" one of the Loose Cultivator Alliance members asked, their voice trembling. Xianxia narrowed her eyes, deep in thought. An Earth Immortal was not someone they could contend with, especially after witnessing how effortlessly the Elder had wounded the Golden Cicada Immortal despite its formidable strength. "Let's withdraw," Xianxia finally sighed, her voice laced with regret. The decision was swift, practical, and left no room for hesitation. The members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance quickly nodded in agreement. The show of dominance by the Earth Immortal had thoroughly convinced them that staying any longer would be nothing short of suicide. Instead, they felt a sense of relief at Xianxia's level-headedness, knowing that she was prioritizing their survival over blind ambition. Wuxia Euros. Following the fall of the White Dragon, the remaining forces, faced with the Earth Immortal's undeniable strength, began to retreat as well. Even the most stubborn of sects recognized the futility of continuing, especially after seeing the carnage unfold. Yet just as many were about to leave the battlefield, a cold voice echoed through the air, freezing everyone in place. "Old man, it seems you're quite quick on your feet." The voice oozed malice, and from the void emerged another figure, cloaked in darkness and emanating an aura of immense power. The surrounding air seemed to still, as if even the wind was afraid to move. Xianxia's heart sank, her eyes immediately recognizing the newcomer. "Scatter now," Xianxia commanded, motioning for her alliance members to retreat with her before they were caught in the gaze of this new arrival. As the crowd instinctively parted, two Earth Immortals stood face to face, the tension between them palpable. The realization that another Earth Immortal had arrived sent ripples of anxiety through the remaining onlookers. "It seems I've arrived just in time," the new Earth Immortal cackled. "Thanks for chasing off those small fry, saved me the trouble." His eyes gleamed as they landed on the Elder, and the two exchanged cold, calculating glares. It was clear that with the arrival of this second Earth Immortal, the balance had shifted. The Elder's calm demeanor shifted to frustration. What had once seemed like an easy opportunity to claim the treasure had turned into a contest with yet another rival, one he hadn't anticipated. His annoyance was palpable, his chance to secure the treasure slipping through his fingers. But the second Earth Immortal was in no hurry. He glanced casually around the battlefield, surveying the remaining forces. His gaze swept over Xianxia and her group, and as soon as he recognized her, his face twisted into a mask of hatred. Well, isn't this convenient? He sneered, his eyes locking onto Xianxia. Girl, do you remember me? A wave of Earth Immortal power surged from him, manifesting as towering, ethereal green mountains that pressed down upon Xianxia and her group, the immense force distorting the air and cracking the very fabric of space. Lightning Command Seal. Primordial Thunder. Release, Xianxia shouted, reacting with lightning speed. Her two powerful artifacts, the Five Thunder Immortal Sword and the Lightning Command Seal, activated at once, unleashing an overwhelming burst of primordial lightning that crackled through the air, forming a massive web of protective energy around her and her allies. The members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance followed suit, summoning their own artifacts and channeling their powers to reinforce the defense. Their combined might clashed against the Earth Immortal's attack, triggering a massive explosion of energy that echoed across the battlefield. Boom, boom, boom. The green mountains of Earth Immortal power crumbled under the relentless barrage of golden and lightning energy, but the force of the collision was so great that even nearby retreating sects were caught in the shockwaves. Several unlucky immortals were blasted away, vomiting blood from the sheer pressure of the clash. Without that accursed Jiang Chengxuan, today is truly my lucky day. The Earth Immortal sneered, his face twisted with glee. As the smoke cleared, the vengeful visage of the second Earth Immortal appeared once again, towering over Xianxia and her forces. It was none other than the very same Earth Immortal who had once tried to ambush Jiang Chengxuan during his early days as a fledgling Earth Immortal, only to be utterly humiliated. Now, having stumbled upon Jiang's closest companion, the Earth Immortal was filled with excitement at the prospect of revenge. Xianxia, usually calm and composed, cursed her luck under her breath. Facing an Earth Immortal with a personal vendetta was the last thing she had expected. The members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance exchanged nervous glances, understanding the gravity of their situation. This Earth Immortal had a vendetta against their leader, and they were now in mortal danger. Capturing you will send the perfect message to that damned Jiang Chengxuan. The Earth Immortal roared, his hatred spilling over as he prepared another devastating attack. Revenge consumed his mind, and the treasure was all but forgotten in his bloodlust. This time, the Earth Immortal unleashed the full force of his power. The skies darkened as a wave of primordial energy surged forward, ready to annihilate everything in its path. The space around them warped under the pressure, and the members of the Loose Cultivator Alliance braced themselves, understanding that this strike would be unavoidable. However, just as the catastrophic attack was about to land, another unexpected development took place. No need to be so hasty, young one. There's no need for such cruelty. The Earth Immortal Elder who had been standing idly by suddenly smiled, his hand lifting as he manifested a fishing rod-like artifact. With a casual flick of his wrist, the rod cast a line into the air, which instantly expanded into a mighty river of energy, intercepting the incoming attack. Boom! The collision of the two Earth Immortal forces shook the heavens, and though the strike was halted, the sheer power of the clash left the surrounding immortals speechless. Whispers and confusion spread among the onlookers. Why had the Elder intervened? What was his connection to Xianxia and her group? The vengeful Earth Immortal's eyes narrowed in suspicion as he growled, "Old man, are you actually going to protect these people?" But the Elder merely chuckled and shook his head, his smile calm and unreadable. Chapter 1364, Forced Trade, Timely Arrival. Chapter 1364, Forced Trade, Timely Arrival. A strange atmosphere gradually took over the battlefield. The various forces of cultivators were confused, unable to understand what had just transpired. The disciples of White Dragon Immortal sect went to support the injured White Dragon, while the cultivators of Yellow Sand Immortal sect floated in the air, controlling their sand. The other sects who were trying to leave were now blocked by the newly arrived Earth Immortal, their eyes filled with suspicion. Isn't that the Azure Peak Immortal from the southern region? Why is he targeting the scattered immortal alliance of the Western region? And that old man, isn't he the sky droplet immortal from the Eastern region? Why is he helping them? For a while, the cultivators from various factions whispered and speculated, pointing at the three sides involved. Although they had heard of the scattered immortal alliance before, most of them had no idea about the connection between these two Earth immortals. HMPH, you don't know the full story. Back in the day, when Jiang Zun of the scattered immortal alliance defied fate to ascend, Azure Peak Immortal tried to stop him. It seems that he's still holding onto that grudge, which is why we're seeing this situation unfold now. After a moment, an elder who knew the truth began to explain the backstory, enlightening the surrounding cultivators. So that's it. Jiang Zun's achievement of Earth immortality wasn't easy at all. Some cultivators were shocked as they listened, starting to put the pieces together. Achieving Earth immortality while being targeted by another Earth immortal, yet still succeeding Euros, this was nothing short of a miracle. The mere thought of it stirred the blood of many. Among the gathered forces were those who had attended Jiang Zun's lectures and benefited from his teachings. These cultivators were naturally full of praise for him. Not easy. You don't know the half of it. When Jiang Zun was about to break through, he had the foresight to invite immortal Fuguang from the Heavenly Dragon Merchant Association to guard him. And when Jiang Zun emerged after achieving Earth immortality, he fought against Azure Peak Immortal head-on, defeating him and earning great renown. Such events, can you even imagine them? The old man who had been explaining earlier now continued with a tone of pride, recounting the story. Hearing this, the cultivators of various factions were even more stunned, their bodies trembling with awe. Azure Peak Immortal was a well-known figure, yet he had been defeated by Jiang Zun, who had just achieved Earth immortality. Such a past left them all in amazement. You old fool, what are you trying to pull here? Before the crowd could further reflect on the story, Azure Peak Immortal, eyes filled with cold malice, questioned the old man on the battlefield. At once, Shen Ruyan and the others looked on warily at the elderly man. He, however, merely smiled faintly and said, "We, as immortal lords, attacking these younger cultivators, wouldn't that be breaking the rules? I've always been someone who dislikes such behavior." The Sky Droplet Immortal's words brought the battlefield to a halt once again. "You are Euros." Before Azure Peak Immortal could respond in anger, the old man revealed his true intention. "If you agree to not enter the Cloud Waterfall, I could turn a blind eye to this matter. How about it?" It turned out that the old man hadn't saved Shen Ruyan and her group out of goodwill, nor did he have any particular connection to the scattered Immortal Alliance. He was simply using them as leverage to force Azure Peak Immortal to withdraw from the competition for the treasure. Such a scheme. It was brilliantly cunning. In an instant, it was as if everyone had been struck by lightning. They drew in sharp breaths, inwardly cursing the old man for being a treacherous snake. Azure Peak Immortal's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with rage. Even Shen Ruyan's group felt a surge of anger, their expressions darkening. They had never expected to be used by the old man as bargaining chips. Faced with such treatment, no cultivator could remain indifferent. Yet this was also a lifeline. As long as Azure Peak Immortal's greed for the treasure outweighed his desire for revenge, this old man's bargaining might just buy them some time. "Fine. Fine. Old fool. You've dared to scheme against me." After a long moment of dead silence, Azure Peak Immortal gritted his teeth, pointing angrily at Sky Droplet Immortal and speaking each word with venom. The old man's expression remained unchanged, still wearing a wrinkled smile as he looked at him. It was clear that he had fully grasped the dynamics of the situation and was determined to use Shen Ruyan and the others as pawns in his plan. He knew full well how deeply Azure Peak Immortal resented the scattered Immortal Alliance, and that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him to settle that grudge. By taking advantage of this, he could remove a major competitor from the race for the treasure. So what will it be? After a moment of contemplation, the Sky Droplet Immortal asked calmly. Shen Ruyan and her group tensed up, their eyes filled with seriousness as they turned to look at Azure Peak Immortal. Azure Peak's eyes remained ice-cold, overflowing with killing intent. Shen Ruyan felt a chill in her heart, sensing that they still might not escape their fate. "Fine. Old fool. I agree, now get lost. As expected, after some deliberation, Azure Peak Immortal ultimately did not give up his chance for revenge and chose to abandon the treasure. His deep-seated hatred for Jiang Zun was laid bare. Ha, truly, you're a man of principle, my friend. Far from being offended by Azure Peak Immortal's sharp words, Sky Droplet Immortal responded with a sly, mocking grin. Chapter 1365, Forced Trade, Timely Arrival /2. Chapter 1365, Forced Trade, Timely Arrival /2. With a cold glance at Shen Ruyan and her group, the old man stroked his white beard, put away his celestial treasure, and prepared to head toward the treasure behind the cloud waterfall. Earth immortals were bound to the laws of heaven and earth, and their words and actions carried the weight of vows akin to those of the Tao heart. As such, Sky Droplet Immortal had no fear of Azure Peak Immortal secretly deceiving him. Witnessing this, all the cultivators on the battlefield couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Seeing Shen Ruyan and her companions, fates being casually decided by these two Earth immortals left everyone with a sense of despair, as they couldn't help but think of their own vulnerability. Sky Droplet Immortal had earlier suppressed and insulted them with such ease, and yet, faced with overwhelming power, they had no means of resistance. Sigh, how unfortunate. Cultivators from various factions couldn't help but sigh. Now that the two Earth immortals had struck a deal, the members of the scattered Immortal Alliance were surely doomed. Now let's see who can save you. Amidst the watchful eyes of the crowd, Azure Peak Immortal wasted no time. In the next instant, the power of an Earth Immortal erupted from him once again, shaking the heavens and earth. His Earth Immortal abode materialized, transforming into a vast, verdant celestial land, enveloping a region of the sky spanning thousands of miles. The immense primordial force emanated from him, filling every corner of the void, radiating his wrath. Having been outwitted by Sky Droplet Immortal, his anger could not be quelled, and he now aimed to vent it all on Shen Ruyan and her group. Boom! Above the 9 heavens, the full might of his Earth Immortal domain was revealed. Among the towering green peaks, thunder roared and clouds were swept away by violent winds. The oppressive force made it hard for anyone, except for Sky Droplet Immortal, to breathe. Shen Ruyan and her companions, locked in the Earth Immortal's gaze, felt like they had fallen into an icy abyss, a chill coursing through their veins as their blood ran cold. If you want us dead, it won't be that easy, primordial divine thunder. Even in such dire circumstances, Shen Ruyan's gaze remained resolute. She mustered her remaining celestial energy and spoke with determination. This was truly a life-or-death moment, and there was no room for retreat. Hearing her firm resolve, the members of the scattered Immortal Alliance steeled their gazes as well, radiating the same determination to fight to the death. Even if they were to die, they intended to inflict damage on their foe. The scattered Immortal Alliance never surrenders. In the next moment, the members of the scattered Immortal Alliance shouted in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. Centered around Shen Ruyan, everyone gathered their full celestial power, unleashing their strongest Tao techniques and divine abilities, launching a coordinated attack toward Azure Peak Immortal. In an instant, a massive torrent of multicolored light formed, led by the primordial divine thunder, with wings of black and white lightning and various Tao laws intertwined. This combined force, merging the full power of more than a dozen cultivators Euros, many of whom were true immortal Euros, rushed forward with the weight of their ultimate efforts. Boom! The void shattered, the sky was set ablaze, and the thunder surged relentlessly. The powerful force transformed into a surging heavenly river, crashing toward Azure Peak Immortal. HMPH. How bold! You court death. Faced with their united retaliation, Azure Peak Immortal remained unfazed, though his expression grew even more furious. His eyes widened in rage as he roared, sweeping his hand through the air. The radiant energy of his domain flared, forming a massive, towering green serpent. The serpent hissed fiercely, crossing through multiple barriers in the blink of an eye. Its body expanded rapidly, growing to the size of a mountain range within moments. Gulp! In the astonished eyes of everyone present, a terrifying scene unfolded. The green serpent opened its massive maw and effortlessly swallowed their combined attack whole. The energy exploded within its belly, causing violent tremors and thunderous booms as its insides quaked, bulging outward in strange, unsettling shapes. But after only a few moments, everything calmed down. The green serpent opened its mouth again, exhaling a gust of dark wind as though it had digested all the celestial energy thrown at it. Everyone gasped in shock. Such power surpassed even the three-headed white dragon, and yet this massive green serpent was merely a manifestation of Azure Peak Immortal's divine ability. Its terrifying strength left everyone in awe. The members of the scattered Immortal Alliance suffered backlash from their failed attack, their bodies shuddering as they stumbled back several steps, their celestial energy in turmoil. Even the golden cicada demon king showed signs of exhaustion, its sigils dimming further, its wings beating with less vigor. Beneath the earth immortal level, you are all but ants. How dare you fight back? Today you will all die. Azure Peak Immortal's anger had given way to smug satisfaction. Hovering above Shen Ruyan and her group, he sneered, his mocking voice filled with disdain. Then with a cold smile, he raised his hand, and the massive green serpent lunged once more toward Shen Ruyan and her companions, ready to devour them. As the crushing pressure drew near, a sense of despair filled the hearts of the group, their eyes turning bloodshot. Could this be the end for them? If so, it would be a devastating blow to the entire scattered Immortal Alliance. No, today, you are the one who will die. Just as the moment of death seemed inevitable, a majestic voice echoed through the void. Far off in the distant sky, a scorching sun rose, accompanied by the sound of this voice. As the sound wave spread, the blazing sun quickly grew larger in everyone's eyes, moving with unimaginable speed. In an instant, it arrived at the center of the battlefield. Rara Euros. Before anyone could react, the searing sun, carrying an overwhelming force, rushed straight into the open maw of the green serpent. It seemed like a suicidal move, but the sun's absolute power began to overpower the serpent from within. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a blinding light burst forth, too hot to bear, as primordial fire exploded, melting the void itself. The once majestic green serpent only managed a single roar before being consumed by the blazing sun, burning into countless fragments. The sudden and shocking event was like thunder crashing through everyone's minds. The cultivators from various factions stared in utter disbelief, their eyes wide and mouths agape. Only Shen Ruyan remained calm. The moment she heard the voice, she knew exactly who it belonged to. Her previously serious expression softened into joy, and the tension in her brow relaxed like willow leaves swaying in the breeze. Now, if I say that you are the one who will die today, what will you do? Amidst everyone's gaze, a tall, imposing figure walked out from the flames, speaking slowly. Behind him, a celestial domain hovered, its terrifying aura surpassing even that of Azure Peak Immortal. It's him, Elder Jiang. It's Jiang Zun. Immediately, every cultivator present shouted in disbelief, their eyes shining with awe. The members of the scattered Immortal Alliance, in particular, were filled with excitement and relief. The one who had arrived was none other than Jiang Chengxuan of the scattered Immortal Alliance. Jiang Chengxuan. Azure Peak Immortal's entire body went rigid as the hairs on his neck stood on end. The savage look in his eyes disappeared, replaced with hatred and caution as he muttered through gritted teeth. Their gazes locked in midair, clashing with invisible force in an instant. In the next moment, Azure Peak Immortal felt a chill pierce his heart as if needles had pricked his eyes. Clearly, Jiang Chengxuan had grown far stronger since their last encounter. Moreover, the failure from before still haunted Azure Peak Immortal, casting a shadow over his mind. Now, faced with Jiang Chengxuan's powerful presence, he found it difficult to regain the upper hand. HMPH. Jiang Chengxuan, having suppressed Azure Peak Immortal with a mere exchange of auras, remained composed. Moving like a breeze, he descended to Shen Ruyan's side. Husband, you're here. Yes, are you all right, wife? Chapter 1366, Suppressing Azure Peak, Encounter with the Calamity Weapon /1. Chapter 1366, Suppressing Azure Peak, Encounter with the Calamity Weapon /1. The arrival of Jiang Chengxuan was like the descent of a deity, giving the members of the scattered Immortal Alliance a renewed sense of hope and a firm leader to rely on. Ignoring Azure Peak Immortal completely, he calmly approached Shen Ruyan and the others. It wasn't just Shen Ruyan who felt relief. All the elders of the scattered Immortal Alliance were filled with joy, their faces glowing with excitement. Even the cultivators from various factions, who had previously lamented the fate of Shen Ruyan's group, now looked at Jiang Chengxuan with a mix of shock and awe. Compared to the domineering and petty Azure Peak Immortal and Sky Droplet Immortal, Jiang Chengxuan's arrival with such grace and overwhelming power left them in reverence. "It's good that you're all right. I apologize for arriving late," Jiang Chengxuan said, exhaling a breath of relief after inspecting Shen Ruyan's condition. Despite his composed demeanor, he still felt a lingering sense of dread. Before setting out, he had used his Tao of Fate to foresee the situation and ensure Shen Ruyan's safety. However, he hadn't anticipated just how perilous things would become. Had he not been so much stronger than before and sensed the Earth Immortal's presence, hastening his arrival, Shen Ruyan and the others might not have escaped unharmed. There could have been casualties, a possibility Jiang Chengxuan could never accept. "I'm fine, husband. You arrived at just the right moment, and all the elders are safe as well," Shen Ruyan reassured him, her calm voice easing Jiang Chengxuan's tension. Hearing her words, his expression softened and he nodded slightly. At that moment, the elders of the scattered Immortal Alliance couldn't contain their gratitude. "Elder Jiang, you truly are our savior. Your timely arrival has saved us all, and we are forever grateful. We owe you another great debt, and our hearts overflow with gratitude." Elder Jiang is the shining beacon of hope for the scattered Immortal Alliance. Jiang Chengxuan turned to the elders, seeing their elated faces, and chuckled softly. "Thank you all. Now that the matter is resolved, take some time to rest." His words, spoken with unmatched confidence, struck the crowd like thunder, causing their faces to pale in astonishment. Those present exchanged uneasy glances, especially Azure Peak Immortal, who had already been brooding over Jiang Chengxuan's arrival. Now, hearing Jiang's domineering declaration, his expression turned as dark as ink. Jiang's words euros, "The matter is resolved," a circumflex euros, clearly implied that Azure Peak Immortal was of no consequence, already dismissed as a threat. The sheer audacity of such a statement ignited a burning fury within Azure Peak Immortal. His earlier hesitation vanished, replaced by an overwhelming need to settle the score with Jiang Chengxuan once and for all. Without a confrontation, the mere gossip and mocking glances from the surrounding cultivators would be enough to destroy his reputation. "Jiang, don't think you can push me too far. Do you truly believe yourself invincible?" With his eyes burning red, Azure Peak Immortal pointed at Jiang Chengxuan and roared, his voice filled with anger. His celestial energy surged once more, and the power of his Earth Immortal domain erupted. The brilliant light of his Earth Immortal abode radiated out, pressing down on Jiang Chengxuan. The vast energy of the Earth Immortal, infused with the essence of his Tao, stirred the battlefield once again, rumbling with thunder. The battle had begun. Knowing he was at a disadvantage, Azure Peak Immortal sought to gain the upper hand by attacking first. His divine technique morphed into serpentine green rivers that spanned across the heavens, winding through the void and locking down the area in an oppressive seal. The sheer force of the attack caused the elders of the scattered Immortal Alliance to tense up, feeling the icy wind of death biting into their bones. How ridiculous for an old man to stoop so low as to attack juniors, twisting right and wrong in such a laughable manner. Yet the fear only lasted a moment before it vanished. Amid the rolling thunder, Jiang Chengxuan's voice rang out like a mighty bell, shaking the heavens. His voice carried a profound strength, and before Azure Peak Immortal could react, Jiang Chengxuan's overwhelming celestial energy surged forth, tearing through the void and striking back. In that instant, two Earth Immortal forces collided with earth-shattering might. Countless visions and phenomena filled the air as the terrifying shockwaves rippled through the void. Green mountains made of translucent jade rose from the ground, with phantom immortals standing upon them, some flying through the heavens, radiating boundless power. Opposing them, radiant lights of 5 colors erupted, interwoven with black and white hues. Each beam of light shimmered with life, unleashing the forces of the 5 elements and the laws of life and death. It seemed as if 7 colored dragons were soaring through the sky, dancing among the green peaks, battling the phantom immortals. Each immortal projection, along with the avatars formed from the 5 elements and life and death Tao, appeared to have a life of its own, as they clashed and strategized in their divine combat. The scene left everyone watching in awe, their breaths taken by the sheer spectacle before them. Some gasped at the sight, marveling at the might of these two Earth Immortals. to split the heavens and summon an army of avatars from one's euros. This is the power of Earth immortals. Boom! As the battle raged on, Jiang Chengxuan and Azure Peak Immortal each wielded their Tao with mastery. Chapter 1367, Suppressing Azure Peak, Confronting the Calamity Weapon /2. Chapter 1367, Suppressing Azure Peak, Confronting the Calamity Weapon /2. The battle between Jiang Chengxuan and Azure Peak Immortal raged on, their divine techniques turning the battlefield into a scene of devastation. The heavens quaked, the earth split open, and the spectacle left everyone awestruck. This battlefield, existing between reality and illusion, absorbed the full concentration of the two Earth immortals. The resulting shockwaves made the very heavens tremble, the skies flickering as if the world itself could collapse at any moment. Raw Euros. However, the fierce and mystical exchange did not last long. Soon, Jiang Chengxuan's Tao laws, manifested as celestial dragons, proved to be more agile and cunning. These dragons did not just rely on brute strength, they worked together seamlessly. Within moments, the avatars of countless immortals created by Azure Peak Immortal's power began to shatter into fragments of light. The towering green mountains collapsed one after another, burying many of those spectral immortals beneath them. Only the celestial dragons remained, roaring triumphantly as they tore through the battlefield. Arg! Azure Peak Immortal groaned, staggering backward several steps, his eyes filled with growing hatred as he stared at Jiang Chengxuan. Despite the years that had passed, he was still no match for him. Once again, in a head-to-head confrontation, he had been bested. The members of the scattered Immortal Alliance couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction, clenching their fists and cheering internally. Even the spectators from other factions looked on with awe, thrilled by the opportunity to witness a battle between such powerful figures. They felt their journey had been worthwhile, having seen a true clash between two peak Earth immortals. But Jiang Chengxuan himself remained expressionless, his cold eyes fixed on Azure Peak Immortal. Having broken through to Earth Immortal long ago, Jiang had faced countless terrifying battles against both equally powerful and even stronger foes. He had even faced calamities without flinching. Combat was second nature to him, a skill honed through endless trials. No matter what personal grudges his opponents held, Jiang remained calm and unwavering, never exposing a single weakness. This composure was the key to his undefeated streak. No, I can't accept this. For Azure Peak Immortal, however, the outcome was unbearable. He had spent years obsessively training, improving his cultivation and seeking out rare treasures, all for the chance to one day defeat Jiang Chengxuan and erase the shame of his past defeat. Yet now, after all that effort, he had once again lost, and the gap between them had only widened. This realization shattered his pride and shook the foundation of his Tao heart. I refuse to lose. Jiang Chengxuan, I will kill you. Driven by madness, Azure Peak Immortal's face contorted in fury, his appearance no longer befitting an Earth immortal. It was as if a demonic seed had taken root in his heart, corrupting his aura with hints of destruction. For a brief moment, Jiang Chengxuan sensed a familiar yet ominous presence in Azure Peak Immortala Euros, something resembling calamity energy. Kill! Before Jiang could investigate further, Azure Peak Immortal had already regrouped, launching another furious attack. The mountains of his Earth Immortal domain surged wildly, growing like weeds, and beams of celestial light exploded forth like a torrential downpour. The immense power of an Earth Immortal and the essence of his Tao spread out without restraint, covering the sky in blinding green light, engulfing the battlefield in an instant. The factions standing on the outskirts of the battlefield were caught in the aftershocks, feeling their bodies tremble with pain, their minds clouded by the sheer intensity of the energy. The piercing green light seemed to invade their very souls, causing damage with just a glance. Facing such an overwhelming onslaught, even Jiang Chengxuan had to prepare himself. Without hesitation, he summoned his Earth Immortal domain, manifesting an ethereal land filled with towering mountains, drifting clouds, and the cycle of life and death. The aura of his domain far surpassed that of Azure Peak Immortal. Buzz Euros. A low hum echoed through the void, and the chaotic energy surrounding them began to settle, centered around Jiang's domain. The brilliant green light that had engulfed the battlefield began to fade rapidly, suppressed by Jiang's overwhelming power. The onlookers, who had been struggling under the weight of Azure Peak Immortal's energy, suddenly felt relief as the pressure lifted from their bodies. They looked up to see Jiang Chengxuan's immense power twisting the fabric of space, manifesting the laws of the five elements, life and death, and reincarnation. These three divine phenomena surged forward, colliding head-on with Azure Peak Immortal's blinding green light. Boom! Euros. In the next moment, the two forces clashed with a deafening explosion, causing the heavens to tremble and fracture. Distant stars that had not yet fallen were reduced to fragments by the immense power, some even igniting midair and burning away to nothing. Arg! But as the dust settled, the outcome was clear. No matter how frenzied Azure Peak Immortal's attacks had been, the gulf between his power and Jiang Chengxuan's was insurmountable. Their difference in strength had become an unbridgeable chasm. Within moments, Azure Peak Immortal's energy was forcibly suppressed by Jiang Chengxuan's relentless assault. The heavens themselves seemed to tear apart as Jiang's power overwhelmed his opponent. HMPH. However, just as Shen Ruyan and the others were beginning to feel relief, something strange happened. After being struck down by the backlash once again, Azure Peak Immortal did not show signs of rage or despair. Instead, he let out a cold, eerie chuckle. Suddenly, everyone felt a chill run down their spines, a sense of impending doom filling the air. Almost immediately, Jiang Chengxuan realized something was wrong. But before he could react, disaster struck. Boom! In an instant, the residual energy from their battle twisted into a vortex. From the center of that vortex, a small black dot appeared, hurtling toward Jiang Chengxuan's brow with blinding speed. The black light moved so fast that even Jiang Chengxuan had no time to react, unable to summon his celestial power or deploy his domain in time to block the attack. ZZZT. The black light pierced through the air and struck Jiang Chengxuan, its impact followed by a deafening crack of thunder. Black lightning erupted from the point of contact, engulfing Jiang Chengxuan's figure completely. No, a circumflex euros. What kind of power is that? How is this possible? In a state of disbelief, Shen Ruyan and the others cried out in horror. Their eyes widened in shock as they watched Jiang Chengxuan's form disappear into the black lightning, unable to comprehend the sudden reversal. In the stunned silence that followed, a thin black rift appeared in the void, stretching from Azure Peak Immortal's domain to where Jiang Chengxuan had stood. From that rift, a suffocatingly ominous aura seeped out, accompanied by dark, swirling mist. An astute observer immediately recognized the source of this power euros. It was calamity energy. Halasa. Fool. Arrogant fool. How can you possibly resist the power of the calamity weapon? Azure Peak Immortal's expression twisted with malevolent glee as he let out a maniacal laugh. Though his face was pale and his celestial energy was visibly unstable, he no longer cared. Even if using the calamity weapon cost him his future as an immortal, it would be worth it if it meant finally defeating Jiang Chengxuan. From where Jiang Chengxuan stood, now engulfed in calamity energy, there was only Xianxia euros, no response, no sign of life. Only a deathly stillness remained. Chapter 1368. The force behind the calamity weapon, slaying Azure Peak /1. Chapter 1368. The force behind the calamity weapon, slaying Azure Peak /1. For thousands of years, throughout the Xianxia immortal realm, bursts of calamity energy had been emerging. Many cultivators, through fateful encounters, had come to wield the power of this energy. For example, the mysterious faction that had clashed with the Panyu Immortal sect and Bayan Immortal sect, as well as Azure Peak Immortal himself, were among these fortunate yet cursed individuals. The million-year calamity was not just an inanimate natural disaster, a mere storm without life. Every calamity that erupted was driven by the destructive will of the heavens, bringing forth disasters wherever it struck. The calamity weapons born from this energy were no exception. They were the embodiment of calamity's consciousness, created to better sow destruction. These calamity weapons, once naturally formed, followed a mysterious guidance, seeking out cultivators filled with hatred or greed. Through these weapons, the calamity energy manipulated these cultivators, gifting them power. This tactic was eerily effective. Every calamity weapon in the Xianxia immortal realm had found its hosta euros, Azure Peak Immortal included. After acquiring a calamity weapon, the cultivator's strength would increase significantly. However, their minds would gradually be influenced by the calamity energy. Even Earth immortals, if not firm in their Tao hearts, could succumb to this influence, giving in to greed and hatred. Azure Peak Immortal was a prime example of this. What consumed him was his deep hatred toward Jiang Chengxuan. Now, with the power of the calamity weapon, he had finally achieved his twisted dream. You will all die. The entire scattered immortal alliance will be obliterated. Azure Peak Immortal raged, his mind completely lost to madness as he watched the calamity weapon's power seemingly consume Jiang Chengxuan. His eyes, bloodshot and crazed, scanned over the members of the scattered immortal alliance with cold malice. The factions witnessing the scene felt chills down their spines, dreading what would come next. Yet the members of the scattered immortal alliance were too stunned to respond to Azure Peak Immortal's madness. Their eyes remained fixed on the spot where Jiang Chengxuan had been swallowed by the destructive calamity lightning, their hearts pounding with fear. The terrifying force radiating from that space was overwhelming, snuffing out all traces of life and hope. HMPH. Not even an Earth immortal can survive under the power of a calamity weapon, Azure Peak Immortal sneered. But don't worry, I'll send you all to join him soon enough. With that, he slowly approached the group, his tone cruel and bloodthirsty. The moment Jiang Chengxuan was consumed by the calamity, all the darkness in Azure Peak Immortal's heart had turned into unbridled joy. The pleasure he felt at this moment far surpassed the satisfaction of when he had first become an Earth immortal. In a flash, Azure Peak Immortal descended upon the scattered immortal alliance with overwhelming pressure, his Earth immortal power radiating outwards. The divine light of his domain, vast and all-encompassing, blotted out the sky as it pressed down on Shen Ruyan and her allies. The force was so overwhelming that, without Jiang Chengxuan's protection, they were doomed. Boom! Under the shocked and uncertain gazes of the onlookers, Azure Peak Immortal's attack struck where Shen Ruyan and the others stood, hitting its mark with unerring accuracy. The Earth immortal power tore through the void, creating a massive black hole. In that abyss, there was no trace of any other energy euros, only the chilling forces of death and destruction, endlessly swirling. So it ends like this. Even such outstanding talents can meet their doom in this treacherous immortal path. Now, it seems the scattered immortal alliance will face disaster. The surrounding factions watched in horror and murmured amongst themselves. Each successive twist in the events had shaken them to their cores, and this final result had caught them completely off guard. Jiang Chengxuan, who had seemed on the verge of victory, had ultimately been slain by Azure Peak Immortal through some bizarre and sinister means. Let's leave. That madman could do something worse, one cultivator, who had once benefited from Jiang Chengxuan's teachings, suggested. Reluctant to witness more, they prepared to leave the scene. HMPH. But before anyone could depart, Azure Peak Immortal acted again. His Earth Immortal domain expanded, suppressing the entire region. Instantly, every cultivator present felt an immense weight crush down on them, making movement nearly impossible. It was as though they were being pinned beneath a mountain. You think you can leave? You will all stay here, forever. Azure Peak Immortal's cold, maniacal laughter echoed through the void. The meaning behind his words made every immortal shudder, as if they had fallen into an icy abyss. Respected Immortal, we have no quarrel with you, and we didn't aid the scattered immortal alliance. Someone from the White Dragon Immortal sect shouted, pleading desperately. Spare us, Great One. Our ancestor, the White Dragon Patriarch, will not take this lightly if you harm us, another threatened. Respected Immortal, this matter has nothing to do with us. Why must we be drawn into this? The cultivators from the White Dragon and Xianxia Immortal sects, along with other factions, all responded with fear and anger, shouting their protests. But Azure Peak Immortal paid them no heed. His eyes gleamed with bloodlust as he coldly declared, My calamity weapon demands your lives. You will all stay here, obediently. At that moment, an uncontrollable urge to kill surged through his body. It was as though a voice in the depths of his mind was urging him to begin a massacre, to use their blood to empower the calamity weapon and increase its strength. Chapter 1369, The True Power of the Calamity Weapon, Slaying Azure Peak /2. Chapter 1369, The True Power of the Calamity Weapon, Slaying Azure Peak /2. In his injured state, Azure Peak Immortal's desire for power had reached its zenith. You, In an instant, without giving any of the other factions, Immortals a chance to speak, Azure Peak's eyes turned icy and he struck. With a sweep of his hand, black winds roared from his domain, sweeping toward the various factions. These winds carried a sinister, destructive aura, eerily similar to the power of the calamity energy. The White Dragon Immortal sect was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. In panic, they quickly formed a sword formation, summoning white heavenly light to counter the oncoming force. But how could their power compare to that of an Earth Immortal? The moment the two forces clashed, the sword formation was obliterated like brittle wood in a storm. The black wind surged forward without resistance, crashing down upon the three-headed white dragon. Rara Euros. In an instant, the white dragon let out a howl of agony. Its one sprite scales dulled, turning brittle and decayed, as if its very life force was being drained by some unseen force. Damn it! What is this cursed thing? Even the White Dragon Immortal Sect's cultivators were not spared, as the black wind seeped into their bodies. Their strength was rapidly being siphoned away, and their cultivation levels began to plummet at an alarming rate. The cultivator, this was a fate worse than death of Euros, an absolute nightmare. No, you can't do this. Evil cultivator. You're an evil cultivator. In the sky, black winds rampaged unchecked, and cultivators from every faction cried out in despair. They unleashed all their power, battling against the storm, but to no avail. Ha ha ha. Azure Peak Immortal sneered, his expression manic with satisfaction. He felt an intoxicating pleasure as the calamity weapon's power in his domain slowly restored itself. Unbeknownst to him, however, the calamity weapon had already merged with his domain, becoming inseparable from it. Even if he wanted to remove it, it was far too late. Once I drain these fools dry, I'll use the calamity weapon to kill that old wretch Xianxia and claim the treasure. Then the entire immortal realm will bow before me. Drunk on his growing power, Azure Peak Immortal muttered to himself in ecstasy. Never before in his cultivation had he felt such euphoria. It was as if the entire world was his for the taking. You're ugly enough, but your dreams are even worse. Just as Azure Peak Immortal felt he had ascended to the heavens, a mocking voice rang out from the void. The taunt was like a slap across his face, shattering his bliss. Instantly, he was filled with rage and embarrassment. Who dares? I'll skin you alive and turn you into a puppet. Furious, Azure Peak Immortal's eyes burned red as he glared toward the source of the voice. But as soon as he saw who had spoken, he froze, utterly dumbstruck. His eyes shifted from shock to terror and then to anger. Dreaming of victory already. Isn't it a little early? The voice, calm and cold, echoed again, continuing to mock him. The figure raised a hand, and an overwhelming wave of primal water and fire surged forth, engulfing the battlefield. In an instant, the black wind that had been tormenting countless cultivators was swallowed and incinerated, vanishing without a trace. Huff, huff. The surviving cultivators emerged from the chaos, battered but alive. They were dazed, their faces filled with a mixture of disbelief and joy. It's him. It's immortal Jiang. He's not dead. Finally, the identity of the figure was revealed to Euros, none other than Jiang Chengxuan. Hovering in the sky, Jiang stood tall and unscathed, contrary to what everyone had assumed. He hadn't perished, in fact, he hadn't even been harmed. Impossible. The power of the calamity energy. How could you have survived it? Azure Peak Immortal's composure crumbled as he screamed in disbelief. He couldn't accept this reality. The power of the calamity weapon was something even he feared, and yet his sneak attack had completely failed. Jiang Chengxuan remained untouched. A calamity weapon. Pathetic. That's just an imitation, Jiang replied coldly. Have you ever seen the power of a true calamity weapon? His eyes flashed with a sharp light, and as he reached into the void, black mist and red lightning surged forth. A black and red storm suddenly materialized, bringing with it a terrifying aura of destruction that left everyone momentarily stunned. Compared to this force, the earlier black wind was as insignificant as a flickering candle beside the blazing sun. Buzz Euros. With a deafening hum, a pitch-black long blade appeared in Jiang's hand. The blade radiated an aura of annihilation, surrounded by a veil of black mist, as if it were a manifestation of a bottomless abyss. In the critical moment of Azure Peak's sneak attack, Jiang had summoned the true calamity weapon granted by his system of euros, an incomparable treasure that absorbed the power of calamity without draining life force or blood. The weapon's destructive potential far surpassed that of Azure Peak's imitation. The difference between the two weapons was like night and day. The power Azure Peak had unleashed wasn't even enough to satisfy Jiang's weapon. Impossible. Impossible. How can you have one too? Azure Peak Immortal's mind fractured as he shouted in despair. Jiang's calamity weapon radiated a power far greater than his own. How could such a thing exist? It must be fake. You bastard. Driven to madness, Azure Peak Immortal channeled every ounce of his strength into one last desperate assault. His domain trembled, and the mountains within turned black as calamity energy erupted from them, as if a calamity itself had begun within his domain. The power he unleashed now was even more terrifying than before, amplified by the energy he had stolen from the surrounding cultivators. Perfect. Let's test this weapon properly. Jiang remained calm, his heart as steady as ever. With the black blade in hand, he stood like an unshakable pine tree in the midst of a storm. As the blackened figure of Azure Peak hurtled toward him like a collapsing star, Jiang finally made his move. With one clean, decisive stroke, he slashed his blade. Buzz of euros. The blade's arc tore through the void, opening a vertical black hole that seemed to lead into an even deeper abyss. It swallowed the black star that was Azure Peak whole. Wave after wave of calamity energy was drawn into the void, and in the blink of an eye, Azure Peak's massive star was reduced in size, its strength rapidly draining. Gradually, Azure Peak Immortal's terrified face emerged from the collapsing mass. The black mist that had once surrounded him dissipated, revealing his now frail and weakened form. His domain, once brimming with power, was on the verge of collapse, split by cracks that ran deep through it. So this is the truth. Jiang's eyes narrowed as he peered into the core of Azure Peak's domain, where he saw the calamity weapon embedded. In an instant, the entire mystery became clear to Jiang. He understood the nature of the calamity schemes. Crack! In the next moment, the calamity weapon embedded in Azure Peak's domain shattered. Azure Peak's body convulsed, and in that instant his soul was utterly annihilated. Chapter 1370, The Battle Ends, New Storm Stir /1. Chapter 1370, The Battle Ends, New Storm Stir /1. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence as the chaotic energy that had previously torn through the void abruptly ceased. All eyes were now fixed on Jiang Chengxuan. Before him, at the tip of the pitch-black blade, a figure had been impaled. Azure Peak Immortal, the defeated enemy, was now suspended on the blade, engulfed in black flames. These flames were an unsettling mix of life and destruction, creating a strange, terrifying aura that sent shivers down everyone's spine. I refuse to accept this. I was supposed to be the one chosen by fate. Azure Peak Immortal's voice quivered as the last remnants of life drained from him. His face grew old and haggard in a matter of moments, but his eyes remained locked on Jiang Chengxuan, filled with undying resentment. He had believed the appearance of the calamity weapon was a gift from the heavens, a sign that he was destined to rise during the great calamity. Buoyed by this conviction, he had come to seize the treasure, and even after being outmatched by Jiang Chengxuan, he had refused to retreat, choosing instead to face him head-on. But that very confidence, born from the calamity weapon, had led him down an inevitable path to death. In battles between Earth Immortals, it was rare for one to die. Even in a duel between a mid-stage Earth Immortal and an early-stage one, killing was a difficult task. Earth Immortals had vast domains rich in origin energy, capable of healing almost any injury. Their souls were entrenched in their domains, making them incredibly resilient. Yet Azure Peak Immortal, blinded by hatred, had forsaken the option to flee. He had fought until his demise. That was the primary reason for his downfall. The calamity weapon, which had merged with his domain, was devoured by Jiang Chengxuan's superior calamity blade. With it, his domain collapsed, destroying his source energy. His euros, did I see that right? Was Azure Peak Immortal's soul truly obliterated? Impossible, an Earth Immortal slain just like that. What kind of divine weapon can even an Earth Immortal not withstand? The fall of an Earth Immortal. This is beyond belief, truly against the heavens. The witnessing cultivators were clueless about the intricate workings of the battle. From their perspective, Jiang Chengxuan had merely brandished his black blade and delivered a single strike, which led to the death of Azure Peak Immortal. It was a sight unseen in all of history. Shock rippled through the crowd as many gasped audibly, unable to fathom what they had just witnessed. Earth immortals were seen as the pinnacle in any region of the immortal realm, beings that seldom appeared, let alone perished. To witness the death of one with their own eyes was a once-in-a-lifetime event for these cultivators. Their faces were pale, their minds reeling as if struck by lightning. Rumble! Just then, Azure Peak Immortal's soul finally disintegrated. Behind him, his shattered domain, pierced by the calamity weapon, began to emit thundering sounds. Waves of pure destruction surged out like a tidal wave, shaking the void and leaving cracks in its wake. Suddenly, the gathered cultivators snapped out of their stupor, hastily activating their powers and fleeing in all directions as beams of light streaked across the sky. Moments later, Azure Peak Immortal's domain exploded entirely. The raw immortal energy within it caused the space around them to fracture like glass. It felt like the end of the world was upon them. This explosion contained the accumulated essence and energy that Azure Peak Immortal had cultivated for millennia. The celestial essence, previously housed within his domain, was now violently returning to the heavens. Euros. Amid the growing energy waves, a towering mountain, shimmering with celestial light, materialized out of thin air. It expanded rapidly, representing Azure Peak's Tao and origin energy as it attempted to disperse into the sky. Trying to flee, Jiang Chengxuan, who had remained as still as a stone Buddha throughout the battle, suddenly spoke, his voice cold and cutting as his eyes locked onto Azure Peak's remnant energy. In an instant, he raised the black blade once more, and with lightning speed, slashed toward the retreating mountain of energy. A storm of calamity energy erupted in the sky, black light swirling like a vortex. The sun and moon above seemed to dim, their light snuffed out by the black storm. Within this storm, the radiant mountain grew increasingly prominent. Sharp-eyed observers could see a faint glimmer of black light deep within the mountain's Euros, a remnant of the calamity weapon's will, hiding and attempting to escape. Boom, 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 boom. But it was too late. Through his own calamity weapon, Jiang Chengxuan had sensed the presence of the other calamity energy. In the sky, he danced around the spectral mountain, slashing repeatedly. Each swing of his blade brought forth a thunderous roar, as if he were chopping down the mountain itself. Each strike carved away huge chunks of the radiant mountain, leaving massive pieces of shattered glass-like rock falling from the sky, scattering across the heavens with a thunderous crash. The sight left the onlookers wide-eyed, once again struck by Jiang Chengxuan's domineering presence. They couldn't help but clench their fists, feeling their blood surge as they watched the breathtaking display of power. Rumble. Chapter 1371. The Battle Ends, New Storm Stir /2. Chapter 1371. The Battle Ends, New Storm Stir /2. The collapse of the Azure Peak was swift and deafening, with its immortal energy surging like a tidal wave, shaking heaven and earth. Under Jiang Chengxuan's relentless assault, the core of the great mountain was soon exposed. At that moment, the will of the great calamity surged one last time like a bolt of lightning, attempting a final struggle for survival. But Jiang Chengxuan's sharp eyes and quick reflexes made short work of it. His calamity weapon expanded with immense power as he drove it forward with precision, stabbing directly into the core of the black light. In an instant, a surge of chaotic energy spread outwards, throwing every immortal on the battlefield into momentary darkness, as if they had been plunged into a realm of pure chaos. "Be still," came Jiang Chengxuan's thunderous command. The darkness dissipated as quickly as it had come, swallowed by a mystical force as gusts of profound wind swept the field, consuming the remaining calamity energy. The gathered immortals blinked in confusion, struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. This treasure hunt had been a perilous ordeal. Many had come close to death multiple times. The battle had claimed numerous lives, turning the expedition into a near disaster. Now, as the remnants of the calamity's influence faded, they realized the true danger they had been in, and how they had unknowingly been caught in a web of conspiracy. Watching Jiang Chengxuan absorb the last of the calamity energy, many of them were unsure whether to flee, thank him, or simply remain frozen in place. The battlefield fell into a tense silence once more as the immortals hovered in the air, gazing at Jiang Chengxuan's commanding figure. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Jiang Chengxuan finished absorbing the calamity energy with his weapon. Strange and intricate runes now covered the blade, radiating an ancient and overwhelming aura. Even Jiang Chengxuan himself could not hide his satisfaction. As the master of the calamity weapon, he could feel the source energy it now held. Its power was now far greater than even his primordial water and fire sword. It had truly ascended to another level. Wuxia Euros. Jiang Chengxuan let out a long breath, calming the energy within him. His gains weren't limited to the enhanced weapon. By slaying Azure Peak Immortal, he had also absorbed some of the shattered domain's source energy. Part of it had returned to the world, but a significant portion had been devoured by his own domain, advancing his cultivation even further. "You can come out now," Jiang Chengxuan said softly, retracting his power. From within his domain, a radiant light emerged, revealing the figures of Shen Ruyan and the other members of the scattered Immortal Alliance. In the crucial moment earlier, Jiang Chengxuan had discreetly hidden them within his domain, shielding them from Azure Peak Immortal's deadly attacks. "Beloved," Shen Ruyan's graceful figure flew toward him, her voice trembling with relief as she threw herself into his arms. The previous attack from Azure Peak Immortal had shaken her to her core. She knew that if Jiang Chengxuan had truly fallen, her world would have crumbled. "No harm done. I'm not so easily defeated," Jiang Chengxuan chuckled softly, patting her shoulder to calm her. "Where is Azure Peak Immortal now?" one of the other Immortal Alliance members asked as they approached cautiously. "Dead. There's no need to worry anymore," Jiang Chengxuan replied flatly, not bothering to hide the truth. The weight of his words hit them like a hammer. For a moment, they stood in stunned silence, unable to fully grasp the enormity of what they had just heard. The fall of an Earth Immortal was a cataclysmic event, something unheard of for tens of thousands of years. Yet here was Jiang Chengxuan, having slain one without so much as a scratch. "Jiang Immortal, thank you for saving our lives. That Azure Peak Immortal was mad. If not for your intervention, we would all be dead. Jiang Immortal's mercy is unforgettable. We are forever in your debt. Your strength is unmatched, an awe-inspiring sight. We will forever remember this battle." At that moment, the cultivators from various factions finally found their courage and stepped forward, bowing deeply to Jiang Chengxuan. Their eyes gleamed with admiration and gratitude. The tale of this battle would surely spread throughout the entire Immortal domain, making Jiang Chengxuan a legendary figure. Even other Earth Immortals would now regard him with caution, knowing his overwhelming power. To these lesser cultivators, Jiang Chengxuan was an undisputed master, one who held their lives in his hands. "This brutal war, this so-called treasure, was all orchestrated by the great calamity," Jiang Chengxuan said, his expression turning cold and distant. "You all survived by luck. Return to your sects and prepare for the calamity." His words were a sobering reminder of the larger crisis looming over them. The Immortals nodded hastily, fully aware now of the gravity of the situation. "Thank you for the warning, Jiang Immortal. We will depart immediately." Without hesitation, the survivors bowed once more, then quickly fled, eager to leave the battlefield. Even the battered White Dragon and Yellow Huang Immortals, who had fought against the scattered Immortal Alliance, showed no reluctance in departing. They knew better than to risk any further conflict now that the calamity's influence had been revealed. Yet just as they began to retreat, an unexpected change swept through the air. Suddenly, the 1,000-mile cloudfall, the great celestial cascade that was once the source of their treasure hunt, began to tremble violently. An unimaginable force surged forth, ripping through the sky and enveloping the world in chaos. "No! No! Ayla!" Horrified screams echoed through the battlefield as an oppressive energy engulfed everyone, forcing them to halt in their tracks. The air itself seemed to crack under the weight of the power that now emerged. "That voice, it's sky-draping immortal," Shen Ruyan said gravely as she listened to the chilling screams of agony. Turning to Jiang Chengxuan, she quickly explained what had occurred. Earlier, after striking his deal, sky-draping immortal had taken advantage of the chaos to slip away, heading alone toward the location of the treasure. But now, judging from the terrifying sounds and the explosion of power, something had clearly gone terribly wrong. Rumble! Before anyone could even think of what to do, the next shockwave struck. A deafening roar reverberated across the sky as the thousand-mile cloudfall shattered in an instant. Crimson light shot upward, illuminating the entire region in a blood-red hue. Even the heavens seemed to tremble as crimson lightning crackled across the sky like a celestial catastrophe unfolding. Under this fearsome pressure, even Jiang Chengxuan felt a twinge of unease. The others, meanwhile, could barely breathe, as if the heavens themselves were collapsing upon them. "What is that power?" one of the immortals murmured, their voice shaking with fear. Far behind the collapsing cloudfall, an ominous disturbance was brewing. The horror they had just witnessed was only the beginning. As the massive waterfall crumbled, red light surged forth like an unstoppable tidal wave, shattering the void in its path. Within that crimson glow, faint traces of calamity energy were already spreading, consuming everything in their way. Chapter 1372. The Eerie Tree Emerges, Earth Immortal Puppet /1. Chapter 1372. The Eerie Tree Emerges, Earth Immortal Puppet /1. The thousand-mile cloudfall, the place where the fabled treasure was thought to reside, began to emit an extremely sinister and destructive aura, filling the battlefield with ominous signs. The air, already heavy with chaos and destruction, became even more oppressive, suffocating with a sense of impending doom. The malicious energy Euros, unmistakably calamity energy Euros, seemed to be on a scale far greater than anything previously encountered. "Retreat immediately." Jiang Chengxuan's expression grew grave as he leaped forward, shielding everyone. Facing the overwhelming tidal wave of calamity-infused mist, he didn't hesitate, summoning his Earth Immortal domain and unleashing his boundless immortal power. His hands swiftly formed seals, conjuring beams of piercing celestial light that shot forth to meet the wave. Boom! The Earth Immortal level power clashed violently with the eerie energy, generating a blinding red light that dimmed the sky, as if the heavens themselves were trembling. "Go! This place is far too dangerous to linger." Cultivators from various factions, alarmed by the collision, quickly shouted to their companions. Without hesitation, they harnessed their immortal power, fleeing at their highest speed. The calamity they now faced was unprecedented Euros. This marked the beginning of a new era of chaos. Primordial domain arise. Jiang Chengxuan wasted no time. Seeing his initial attack absorbed by the calamity wave, he steeled his resolve, summoning his Earth Immortal domain with all his might. Above him, a vast and mystical celestial realm unfolded, radiating overwhelming power that surged through the sky, ready to suppress the calamity's advance. Boom! This time, with the full force of his immortal domain, Jiang Chengxuan managed to halt the surge. At the point of impact, massive peaks of celestial energy rose, stemming the advancing tide. However, even Jiang Chengxuan struggled to fully comprehend the nature of this force, which pushed him back several steps before he managed to disperse the residual energy. The oncoming tide of the thousand-mile cloudfall had been forcibly halted, transforming into a vast sea of pitch-black mist, impenetrable and looming like a wall, obscuring all perception beyond it. Through the swirling mist, Jiang Chengxuan could faintly perceive movements of Euros, dark shapes shifting within, suggesting something alive was lurking beyond the veil. But now wasn't the time to investigate. This sudden surge of calamity was no minor threat. He needed to retreat with the others immediately. "We're leaving the Euros, everyone, into the domain." Jiang Chengxuan turned to Shen Ruyan and the others, opening a path within his domain. Beams of celestial light extended, enveloping Shen Ruyan and the others, drawing them into the safety of his immortal realm. But just as Jiang Chengxuan prepared to withdraw, the sinister phenomenon refused to let him go so easily. The black mist began to churn violently, and from the wall of darkness, a fissure slowly opened as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart, revealing something far more terrifying. From within the rift, tendrils of black and dread energy began to extend outward, twisting and writhing like massive roots of an otherworldly tree. These tendrils exuded a vile aura, filling the air with corruption and malice, spreading like a monstrous canopy that blotted out the sky. "What is that?" Jiang Chengxuan's eyes locked onto the emerging creature, and his heart sank. At the center of the grotesque, tree-like mass was a human face, grotesquely embedded into the heart of the twisted form. The face was old and covered in black runes, a horrifying sight. To Jiang Chengxuan's shock, it was the face of the Earth Immortal, sky-draping immortal, now utterly transformed. A once powerful earth immortal had been turned into this abomination, fused with the monstrous tree. Even Jiang Chengxuan, hardened by countless battles, felt a shiver run through him. What kind of sinister force could do something like this? Before Jiang Chengxuan could react, the monstrous tree began to move. Its grotesque form, anchored by countless roots, groaned as it stretched its limbs skyward. The face of sky-draping immortal, now marked by black runes, contorted in pain, his mouth open in a silent scream as he was trapped within the tree's grasp. The tree's roots continued to grow, stretching upwards, easily piercing through the sky for hundreds, then thousands of miles. In moments, the entire sky was crisscrossed by the tendrils, creating a net that enclosed the heavens. Each root pulsed with a malevolent energy, drawing upon the very essence of heaven and earth, absorbing celestial energy, even the laws of nature themselves. Jiang Chengxuan could sense the very rules of the world bending and warping under the tree's influence. Boom! 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 Within moments, the battlefield was entirely consumed by the tree's presence, its branches filled with red lightning that crackled ominously. Waves of black-red calamity energy exploded from the tree's bark, spreading across the battlefield like a flood, turning everything into a pitch-black, lightless void. The sheer scale of this calamity far exceeded anything Jiang Chengxuan had ever encountered. The black mist continued to spread endlessly, consuming all in its path. Nearby sects like Bayan sect and Panyu sect would soon be engulfed unless this catastrophe was stopped. However, Jiang Chengxuan had no intention of intervening further. He had helped the other factions escape earlier, but he wasn't here to play the hero. Jiang Chengxuan knew his limits, and he wasn't interested in saving the world. Chapter 1373, The Emergence of the Cursed Tree and the Earth Immortal Puppet, Part 2. Chapter 1373, The Emergence of the Cursed Tree and the Earth Immortal Puppet, Part 2. Is that the so-called opportunity? Jiang Chengxuan murmured to himself, momentarily halting his planned retreat. A sudden flash of insight struck him as his gaze locked onto the core of the cursed tree, where the face of the once mighty Heavenfall Immortal resided. Embedded in the center of the Heavenfall Immortal's brow was a celestial stone, brimming with an endless primordial energy. From that stone, Jiang Chengxuan could feel an overwhelming concentration of pure essence, along with a deep resonance with the laws of the universe. It was in this moment that Jiang Chengxuan realized where the fabled opportunity, the heavenly fortune he had sensed earlier, truly lay. This celestial stone was not merely a relic of Euros. It was a fusion of the Heavenfall Immortal's power and the sinister tree's influence, capable of bestowing unimaginable power. If claimed, could provide the means to break through to a new level of immortality, possibly even enabling Shen Ruyan to attain the coveted Earth Immortal status. Swish! 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 As the cursed tree's branches writhed and prepared to unleash another devastating attack, Jiang Chengxuan took stock of the situation. Seeing that the battle had not yet reached its most critical stage, he resolved to make his move. The void trembled as the cursed tree's blackened limbs reached into the heavens, summoning forth torrents of black lightning. Like a torrential downpour, the dark bolts cascaded toward Jiang Chengxuan. With determined eyes and an unwavering heart, Jiang Chengxuan chose not to retreat. His gaze sharpened, and with a single sweeping gesture, his Earth Immortal realm surged, summoning the primordial forces of water and fire from his domain. The mighty primal water and fire surged into the sky, carving through the heavens and pushing back the cursed tree's demonic powers. The branches that had rooted themselves in the void were scorched and torn apart by the roaring flames and waves of pure elemental force. The endless storm of black lightning was shattered under the overwhelming power of his strike, creating a brief respite in the battle's chaos. In that instant, a path opened through the chaotic skies, and Jiang Chengxuan seized the opportunity. Without hesitation, he summoned the primal water and fire into a flowing river and condensed it into the form of a sword of Euros, the primal water and fire sword of Euros, before charging directly toward the core of the cursed tree. Amidst the swirling black mist, fragments of ash from the cursed tree rained down as Jiang Chengxuan moved with ethereal grace. His sword slashed repeatedly, cutting through countless cursed branches with swift and precise strikes. It wasn't until Jiang Chengxuan had reached the depths of the cursed tree's domain that the tree seemed to realize the danger. The trapped remnant of the Heavenfall Immortal roared in fury, releasing a torrent of dark calamity chi. Immediately, the branches rooted in the void began to grow wildly, like ancient, gnarled hands reaching out to block Jiang Chengxuan's advance. Each tendril shimmered with dark power, their strength amplified by the blackened sigils that pulsed across their surfaces. Even Jiang Chengxuan's primal water and fire sword struggled to cut through these twisted limbs, slowing with each strike. Whoosh! 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 Behind him, the cursed branches that he had already severed regenerated at an alarming speed. In mere moments, the cursed tree had surrounded him on all sides, like a dark web of sinister intent closing in. Every cursed limb was incredibly sharp and laced with deadly calamity chi, akin to a natural-born calamity weapon of Euros. Each blow could potentially endanger even a powerful earth immortal like Jiang Chengxuan. He was forced to be extremely cautious. Even the slightest touch from one of those branches could result in serious injury. Hum, hum, hum. In a flash of light, Jiang Chengxuan unleashed all of his power without restraint. His attacks were no less fierce than the cursed tree's. One man, one sword, stood firm amidst the black storm of cursed limbs, relentlessly cutting a path forward. Sword beams flashed, and the profound laws of the universe manifested in each swing. The howling of the cursed calamity chi was silenced by the might of Jiang Chengxuan's elemental sword, as it slashed apart the dark energy binding the tree's limbs. With his mind set on retrieving the celestial stone, Jiang Chengxuan held nothing back. His thunderous strikes caught the cursed tree off guard, allowing him to make significant progress. Before long, he had cut his way deeper into the heart of the cursed tree, drawing closer to the Heavenfall immortal's tortured visage. The once dominating immortal who had reigned supreme now looked deathly pale and lifeless. His body was little more than a hollow shell, with only a sliver of residual consciousness clinging to his fragmented soul. A single fist-sized wisp of his spirit hovered above his brow, radiating a pitiful aura of regret and despair. This was all that remained of his once mighty soul. The Heavenfall immortal had never imagined that the treasure he sought would lead him to such a tragic fate. The celestial stone, without a doubt, had been a trap set by the great calamity itself. Lured by its allure, he had lowered his guard and been consumed by the cursed tree. Had he known of the danger, his vast experience might have saved him. But in his haste to seize the treasure, he had sealed his own doom, leaving him a mere puppet of the tree. Jiang Chengxuan glanced at the pitiful remnant of the Heavenfall immortal inside. A once great earth immortal had been reduced to this state, forever trapped within the twisted limbs of the cursed tree. But there was no time for sentiment. Jiang Chengxuan's sword did not waver as he continued to carve his way through the accursed branches. Hum, hum, hum. The sound of thunderous clashes filled the air as Jiang Chengxuan pressed forward, closing the distance between himself and the core of the cursed tree. Boom, boom. Sensing imminent danger, the cursed tree reacted violently. Dark vortices of energy spun wildly as the Heavenfall immortal's body became the focal point for the tree's counterattack. In the blink of an eye, a monstrous hybrid of the Heavenfall immortal's corpse and the cursed tree of Euros emerged from the swirling vortex. Its form was grotesque, with gnarled wooden limbs and a face twisted in agony. The puppet wielded a black spear, infused with the malevolent power of calamity chi. Its body was encased in armor forged from the same energy, making it nearly impenetrable. The puppet charged toward Jiang Chengxuan with blinding speed, its spear thrust forward with lethal precision. The blow was so powerful that it deflected even the mighty primal water and fire sword. Edwin. The puppet's 6 arms moved with terrifying speed and strength, unleashing a barrage of attacks on Jiang Chengxuan. Each punch shattered the very fabric of space, leaving black holes in their wake. Jiang Chengxuan was forced to go on the defensive, using the primal water and fire sword to parry the puppet's relentless assault. Yet even as he parried, he refused to retreat. The cursed tree's labyrinth of branches surrounded them, creating a deadly battlefield as Jiang Chengxuan faced off against the puppet. Hum! At the height of their clash, the celestial stone embedded in the puppet's brow flared to life. A radiant beam of light shot out from the stone, striking Jiang Chengxuan with overwhelming force. Instantly, Jiang Chengxuan felt his earth immortal power being drained away in an unnatural manner. Even the primal water and fire sword in his hand dimmed as his strength was sapped. Sensing an opportunity, the puppet intensified its attack. 6 arms hammered down at once, leaving Jiang Chengxuan no room to escape. For a moment, it seemed as though Jiang Chengxuan had fallen into a fatal trap. But at the brink of death, Jiang Chengxuan revealed his trump card. Though the cursed tree's powers were formidable, it could not anticipate all of Jiang Chengxuan's abilities. In the critical moment between life and death, a dark light burst forth. The calamity blade sliced through the air, delivering a devastating blow. As the puppet's 6 arms descended, the blade arced like a perfect crescent moon. Calamity Chi surged, tearing through the air with overwhelming force and striking the puppet squarely. The armor, which even the primal water and fire sword had failed to break, shattered under the blade's might. A deep crack split the puppet's body, and the cursed Calamity Chi within it spilled out. The puppet roared in agony. Sensing defeat, it abandoned its offensive, retreating rapidly. For the first time, it felt fear euros, the primal terror of being devoured by a power even more malevolent than itself. HMPH. Trying to flee. Chapter 1374. Seizing the Mysterious Treasure, the Great Calamity Descends, Part 1. Chapter 1374. Seizing the Mysterious Treasure, the Great Calamity Descends, Part 1. The tide of the battle shifted in an instant. One moment, the puppet of the once mighty Heavenfall Immortal, controlled by the sinister demonic tree, was unleashing its devastating powers, suppressing Jiang Chengxuan and trapping him in a deadly predicament. But in the next moment, the situation reversed completely. Jiang Chengxuan's fabled weapon, the Calamity Blade, was unleashed. It proved to be the perfect counter to the demonic powers of the strange tree. In a split second, the immortal puppet was forced to retreat, but Jiang Chengxuan showed no mercy, pressing forward relentlessly. Black arcs of destructive energy radiated from the Calamity Blade, negating the demonic tree's powers as though they were mere illusions. The once imposing abilities of the tree began to dissipate into thin air, vanishing like wisps of smoke. With a flash, Jiang Chengxuan's blade pierced forward, his movement as elusive as a horned deer scaling impossible heights. At the same time, his powerful earth immortal realm surged with its essence, overwhelming the surrounding tendrils of the tree. In an electrifying moment, his sword strike, guided by perfect precision, landed directly on the Heavenfall Immortal's brow, where the mysterious celestial stone was embedded. Boom! A torrent of Calamity Chi surged into the puppet's vulnerable point, funneled by the strike of the Calamity Blade. The immortal puppet, forged from the remains of the Heavenfall Immortal, let out a horrific wail as the sinister tree's massive tendrils trembled wildly in response. They flailed about in desperation, slicing through the void and leaving terrifying rifts in the fabric of space. The entire battlefield quaked violently. Black fog billowed through the air as cracks split the heavens, and the massive wall of clouds formed by the demonic tree rippled like a monstrous wave, twisting with eldritch energy. But despite the chaos and the ominous sounds filling the air, Jiang Chengxuan remained resolute, his heart steady and his mind clear. He was completely unfazed by the demonic tree's intimidating presence. With a mighty shout, Jiang Chengxuan poured every ounce of his willpower into his blade. His earth immortal strength surged, channeling into the Calamity Blade and driving deeper into the celestial stone lodged in the puppet's brow. Hum, hum. The void distorted further, the surrounding tree trembling in a frenzied rage. Sharp, mind-piercing sounds rang through the air, and for a brief moment, even Jiang Chengxuan's mind was clouded with confusion. Yet his unwavering focus endured, his will remained unbroken. Finally, the celestial stone, the puppet's lifeblood, began to shift. Though it was only the size of a finger, it weighed as heavily as a mountain range. Even Jiang Chengxuan's immense power couldn't pull it out entirely. However, the celestial stone was the key to the puppet's destruction. With the blade buried deep in its weak point, the puppet thrashed helplessly, its grotesque face contorted in fear. At this rate, I won't have enough time to get out unscathed. Jiang Chengxuan glanced upward at the writhing tendrils in the sky. The tree's twisted energies were already gathering for another deadly strike. He knew that removing the stone would further entangle him in its power, and the tree's abilities were far too dangerous to be underestimated. If he delayed any longer, neither he nor his comrades would leave this place alive. There's no other way. With resolve, Jiang Chengxuan made his decision. His expression hardened as he spoke softly to himself. In an instant, he summoned a surge of dark energy from within his earth immortal realm, directing a black beam into the calamity blade. This was none other than the essence of pure calamity chi. Boom! The power of the calamity blade surged exponentially, its destructive aura towering towards the heavens. Tendrils of the demonic tree were ripped apart by the storm of calamity chi, shredded into fragments that scattered across the void. Hum! Hum! In the midst of this chaos, the celestial stone finally began to crack. Jiang Chengxuan, no longer attempting to pry it free, changed tactics. He slashed downward with his blade, slicing cleanly through the stone. A dark, ominous glow spread across the stone's surface, and in an instant it began to split in two. Boom! Boom! This reckless move unleashed a torrent of unimaginable power from within the stone. The chaotic energy exploded into the sky, spreading waves of destruction far and wide. Even the demonic tree, towering and invincible, was shaken to its core, trembling like leaves in a storm. The collision of these colossal forces sent shockwaves through the entire battlefield. Dark clouds and violent gales raged, hiding all traces of the energy within. Even the dark magic the tree had been preparing was forcibly interrupted by the overwhelming clash. It was a long time before the chaos began to subside. The skies cleared, revealing the devastated landscape left behind by the titanic battle. In the heart of the demonic tree, Jiang Chengxuan's presence had vanished. The immortal puppet was still suspended in the air by the tree's tendrils, but the damage was clear. Half of the vast forest of tendrils had been severed, leaving gaping wounds leaking with chaotic energy. And in the midst of the thick fog, the most noticeable change was at the puppet's brow. The celestial stone that had once radiated with mystical light was now half gone, forcibly cleaved in two by Jiang Chengxuan. Woo-woo! From the void came the sound of mournful wailing, as though some ancient entity was howling in despair over its defeat. Chapter 1375. Seizing the Celestial Treasure, the Great Calamity Descends, Part 2. Chapter 1375. Seizing the Celestial Treasure, the Great Calamity Descends, Part 2. The chaotic changes that had been previously interrupted by Jiang Chengxuan now resumed with terrifying momentum. In the swirling void, crimson light gathered at the remaining branches of the cursed tree, and within moments, large, ominous fruits began to form, hanging heavily from the branches, exuding an overwhelming aura of primordial energy. One after another, the fruits appeared in clusters, covering the heavens like a plague. They expanded and contracted, as if mimicking the rhythmic beating of blood-red hearts, their pulsations growing faster and more intense with each passing moment. Suddenly, the cursed tree trembled violently, and the countless blood-colored fruits hanging from its branches began to plummet from the sky. As they fell, they ignited, burning fiercely like meteors made of flesh and blood, their fiery descent scorching the void and turning black as they neared the ground. Boom! 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 When they smashed into the earth, they erupted violently like a rain of destruction, sending shockwaves of fire and lightning across the ground. The force of the impact ripped the landscape apart, shattering the earth as flames and thunder consumed everything in their path. From the shattered fragments of these fiery fruits, strange and twisted figures began to emerge, crawling out of the wreckage like malevolent beings born from the depths of chaos. Each figure was grotesque, inhuman, their bodies composed of writhing runic patterns, twisted and contorted as though crafted by some ancient, malevolent force. These beings, cloaked in a shroud of calamity chi, stood impervious to the raging storms of fire and lightning surrounding them. Wherever they walked, the ground beneath their feet would become infected with calamity chi, devouring all traces of immortal energy and converting it into more calamity chi that spread like a plague, corrupting everything in its path. Hum hum. As the last of the blood-colored fruits fell, the twisted beings, now numbering in the thousands, formed eerie formations on the ground. Like a swarm of locusts, they moved in perfect synchronization, spreading outward in all directions, filling the sky with a thick, choking mist. Their purpose was clear euros. They would carry the calamity to every corner of the immortal domain. Meanwhile, in the distant Panyu immortal sect, the great wave of calamity unleashed by the collapse of the cloud waterfall had already reached their gates, spreading chaos throughout the sect. Sect Master. Sect Master. The protective formation is failing. The calamity chi is breaking through. We must summon the Patriarch immediately. The once serene mountains surrounding the Panyu immortal sect had been reduced to a desolate wasteland. Dark, ominous clouds filled the sky as calamity chi surged across the land, suffocating the once lush and vibrant immortal energy that had nourished the sect for millennia. At the gates of the sect, countless disciples had gathered, standing on high alert, channeling their immortal power into the sect's protective barrier, desperately trying to hold back the tide of calamity chi. But despite their efforts, the protective formation flickered and trembled under the relentless assault of the calamity. Cracks began to form, spiderwebbing across the barrier's surface as the pressure of the calamity threatened to tear it apart. "Hold on. The patriarch will awaken soon." The sect master's voice rang out, his face pale but resolute. He had barely escaped the earlier battle, only to return to find this impending catastrophe looming over his sect. Now all hope rested on the revival of their patriarch Euros, a powerful earth immortal who had once walked the path of immortality, but had long since entered a deep slumber to preserve his remaining lifespan. The patriarch was the sect's final hope, a lifeline that had been sealed away for centuries. Without a path to further enlightenment, earth immortals were bound by the limits of their lifespans. Many, like the patriarch, had chosen to enter stasis, hoping that future generations might find the solution to their impending death. But now, in the face of annihilation, the sect had no choice but to awaken their ancient protector. However, the process of undoing the complex seals that had kept the patriarch in stasis required timia euros, time that the crumbling protective barrier might not be able to provide. "Hold the line. If we allow the calamity chi to breach the sect, even the patriarch's awakening won't save us." The sect master's voice carried a note of desperation as he rallied the disciples to pour every ounce of strength into the barrier. The disciples gritted their teeth, pushing themselves beyond their limits, channeling every drop of energy into the faltering formation. Miraculously, their efforts held. The barrier, though fragile and on the brink of collapse, continued to stand. The relentless tide of calamity chi was held at bay, at least for the moment. Just a little longer. Seeing the barrier hold, a glimmer of hope returned to the sect master's eyes. If they could maintain this until the patriarch awakened, they might still have a chance to survive. But their hope was short-lived. Boom, boom, boom. Without warning, a terrifying rumble echoed from beyond the protective barrier. The dark clouds churned violently as something massive stirred within the depths of the calamity chi. What are those shadows?" One of the elders gasped, his voice trembling with fear as he pointed toward the churning black clouds. Everyone's gaze followed his trembling finger, and what they saw sent chills down their spines. Amidst the rolling sea of black clouds, countless twisted figures began to emerge. Some floated eerily, others slithered or crawled, their forms shifting and grotesque, with limbs and bodies that defied the natural order. These creatures had no faces, only the faint outlines of figures composed of calamity chi, with sharp, black spikes protruding from their bodies like twisted branches. The air was thick with a malevolent energy, and the sight of these creatures filled the hearts of the sect's disciples with dread. Hum hum. A low, ominous hum filled the air as the twisted figures multiplied, spreading out to encircle the entire Panyu immortal sect. The sheer number of them blotted out the sky, casting an oppressive darkness over the land. "No, no." Panic spread like wildfire through the sect as the twisted creatures unleashed their power, launching a coordinated assault on the protective barrier. Without a sound, the creatures attacked, their blackened spikes elongating and firing toward the barrier like a rain of death. Each impact sent ripples of destructive energy across the surface of the barrier. Boom, boom, boom. The protective formation, already weakened, could not withstand the force of the creature's assault. The barrier shattered into a million fragments, breaking apart like glass under the immense pressure. Despair echoed through the sect as the disciples and elders alike were knocked back by the backlash of the barrier's destruction, blood spurting from their mouths as they crumpled to the ground. "Run! Run!" The sect master's voice rang out in desperation, but there was nowhere to run. The skies themselves seemed to collapse as the waves of calamity chi descended upon them, a tide of darkness crashing down like a falling star. The disciples cried out in terror as the calamity chi enveloped them, their skin burning as though pierced by 1,000 needles, their souls filled with an icy dread that left them paralyzed. Chapter 1376, Under the Great Calamity, All Life Perishes, Part 1. Chapter 1376. Under the Great Calamity, All Life Perishes, Part 1. Vast waves of calamity, chi filled the heavens and earth, completely enveloping the territory of the Panyu immortal sect. In an instant, the sect was shrouded in endless darkness and destruction. Oh yeah? No. It hurts. It's terrifying. Run. What are these things? Monsters. They're monsters. The air was filled with the continuous screams of the disciples of the Panyu immortal sect as the breached calamity chi, and the strange, eerie figures began their merciless slaughter. The once brilliant and thriving sect was reduced to ruin in just a few short breaths of time. For the disciples who had not yet reached the immortal realm, the power of the calamity chi was akin to the deadliest poison in the world. Anyone who came into contact with it found the foul chi seeping into their bodies, corrupting their very essence. The destructive power of the calamity spread through their limbs and bones, eroding their bodies from the inside out. Countless disciples let out horrified screams as they staggered in a futile attempt to flee. But within a few steps, they began to undergo horrific transformations. Their bodies began to emit calamity chi, along with a foul, putrid liquid. Like candles being lit, they quickly melted into puddles of black blood, their power absorbed by the calamity chi, which in turn fueled even greater storms of destruction within the sect. In an instant, the Panyu immortal sect was transformed into a living hell. The disciples and elders who remained could only abandon everything in their desperate attempt to escape. Wherever the calamity chi and the twisted figures went, they devoured all energy-bearing beings in their path. Some immortals tried to resist by summoning their immortal treasures, only to be surrounded by the eerie figures Euros, hundreds of them attacking as one, piercing their bodies with countless black, tree-like spikes until they resembled grotesque pincushions. The most terrifying part of the calamity, however, was what happened after these beings were slain. Instead of vanishing into nothingness, their bodies were transformed into grotesque puppets, covered in the cursed branches of the eerie figures. Their twisted forms now turned on their former friends and comrades, attacking with mindless fury. No. Is this the end of my Panyu immortal sect? Run, sect master. Escape while you can. Even the sect master, a powerful true immortal, could not hide his despair as he witnessed the collapse of his sect. The disciples he had spent centuries cultivating fell in waves, dissolving into pools of black blood that stained the once holy grounds of the sect. The air was thick with an aura of despair and evil. Beside him, the few loyal elders who had survived the onslaught screamed in anguish. They unleashed their full immortal power, attempting one last desperate attack against the encroaching calamity. Sect Master, go. If the ancestor awakens, the Panyu immortal sect may yet survive. In a flash, the blackened shadows of the calamity surged forward, swarming toward them like a tidal wave of death. Without hesitation, the elders pushed the injured sect master back, sacrificing themselves as they charged into the sea of darkness. Agui, Ahu. The sect master's heart broke as he screamed out their names, his eyes red with grief. These two elders had been his closest companions, disciples he had personally nurtured to greatness. To him, they were closer than his own children. But now, faced with the calamity, he could do nothing but watch them charge into their deaths. He was powerless to save them. Damn it all. With tears streaming down his face, the sect master turned away from the scene, forcing himself to flee to the last refuge of the sect. Behind him, the calamity chi raged, consuming everything in its path of Euros, great halls, cultivation grounds, and the bodies of the countless disciples and elders. The once glorious Panyu immortal sect was reduced to nothing but ruin and darkness. Everywhere the calamity chi passed, it left behind only black mist and pools of blood, from which the eerie puppets, controlled by the cursed trees, rose and wailed in agony. Gradually, most of the sect's land was transformed into wasteland. Amidst the devastation, points of crimson light began to gather, emanating an ominous and destructive aura. As strange phenomena manifested in the sky, depicting scenes of apocalyptic disasters, black spikes began to sprout from the crimson light, growing at a terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, they transformed into more cursed trees, their roots spreading across the lands, soaking up the remaining immortal energy like parasites. Boom! 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 Great halls crumbled, mountains split open, and vast sections of the sect were leveled into barren, lifeless plains. Most horrifying of all, this scene was not confined to the Panyu immortal sect alone. In the neighboring Bayan immortal sect, the exact same disaster unfolded. Calamity Chi ravaged their lands just as brutally, killing countless disciples, destroying their sacred grounds, and allowing the cursed trees to take root. The Calamity Chi grew even stronger, spreading to every corner, faster and more ferocious with each passing moment. But the calamity did not stop after destroying one sect. The cursed trees, now firmly rooted, acted as anchors for the calamity, continuing to expand its reach. As they absorbed more and more immortal energy, new crimson fruits began to grow on their branches, birthing more eerie figures, perpetuating the cycle of death and destruction. From this moment, the great calamity had officially descended, spreading like wildfire across the entire immortal domain. How can this be? Dozens of immortal sects have been wiped out in such a short time. What did you say? The Calamity Chi is only 500 miles away from us now. Damn it! What are those twisted shadows? How did they reach our sect? Chapter 1377, Under the Great Calamity, All Life Perishes, Part 2. Chapter 1377, Under the Great Calamity, All Life Perishes, Part 2. The calamity has erupted. Hurry and summon the Patriarch for aid. The news of the calamity's descent spread rapidly across the upper echelons of every immortal sect in the Xianxia immortal domain. Panic, fear, and a chilling sense of doom gripped everyone who heard it. Some learned of the catastrophe only to realize that the Calamity Chi had already reached their doorstep, as the sky in the distance had turned pitch black, obscuring all sight. The overwhelming sense of death and destruction permeated the hearts of every soul within the immortal domain. The source of the calamity was not limited to just Lian Valley. In various regions of the vast immortal domain, strange and sudden changes had occurred. Calamity Chi had erupted, and eerie trees had grown, their twisted shadows spreading destruction far and wide, consuming everything in their path. Even the very rules of the immortal domain were being twisted by these malevolent forces. High-level immortals could sense that the heavens had become bloodthirsty, as if the entire world craved nothing but destruction. After 1,000,000 years of peace, the great calamity had finally arrived. Across the domain, every immortal sect was in despair, scrambling to take action. Some great immortal cities that stood tall on desolate plains immediately shut their gates, activating powerful defensive formations to cut themselves off from all external forces. Even though countless lives were lost and millions perished to the Calamity Chi, no one dared to open the gates even for a moment. Many of the major immortal sects did the same, sealing off their mountain gates and abandoning their disciples and vassals across their territories. My lord, we've lost contact with the immortal lords. Those damnable cowards. They gorged on offerings for centuries, and now they won't even lift a finger. Damn it, they're all dogs. Run. Head west. Flee as far as you can. Go. Don't look back a euros, abandon the city and escape. Among the lower-tier cities and minor sects under the immortal factions, despair reigned supreme. When the Calamity Chi arrived, they found that the almighty immortals who had once seemed omnipotent were now nowhere to be found, unreachable. Cursing their absent protectors, city lords and sect leaders could only urge their citizens and disciples to flee in any direction that might offer temporary safety. Beyond that, there was nothing they could do, for they too had been abandoned. As the Calamity Chi spread like a dark shadow across the immortal domain, it cast a suffocating fear over everyone. With no means of defense, the various factions had no choice but to flee in the opposite direction, seeking even the faintest chance of survival. Even if it meant running until they dropped dead, none dared to stop. The fear of the Calamity Chi had burned itself into their very souls. In just a few short days since the calamity had erupted, over 10 billion lives had been lost across the immortal domain. Millions of immortal cities and sects had been consumed by the Calamity Chi, reduced to wasteland. This was true devastation, a disaster of unimaginable proportions. However, the terror of the calamity extended beyond the mere destruction of sects and cities. As chaos spread throughout the immortal domain, countless mortals and low-level cultivators sought refuge, fleeing towards the few remaining areas untouched by the Calamity Chi, hoping for the protection of the immortal sects. Yet time and again, they were met with rejection. The sects, struggling to protect themselves, had no room for others. Under the immense pressure of the calamity, the desperate masses began to unravel. Over time, violence and madness spread among them. At first, the conflicts arose from disputes among fleeing cultivators. But soon these tensions spread to the masses, igniting a storm of bloodshed. In the face of imminent death, unchecked desires began to fester in the hearts of many. Those who had long harbored secret lusts or grudges found themselves giving in to their baser instincts. Men who had yearned for women they could never have now revealed their true natures, taking by force what they could not win. Small officials, once oppressed and scorned, now turned on their superiors, venting their rage with violence. Others, once restrained by law or honor, became consumed by hatred and anger, acting with unrestrained savagery. Perhaps it was the influence of the calamity chi, but bloodshed and chaos spread rapidly. Along the roads of escape, blood was spilled, and the violence escalated. "You old bastard! I've put up with you long enough. You berate and insult me every day. If not for that bit of spirit stones, I'd have killed you long ago. Slut! I've been so good to you, and you still refuse me. Now you're mine. No one will take you from me. Hand over everything you've got, or no one leaves here alive." Under the shadow of the calamity, whether immortal or mortal, everyone fell into despair. In this atmosphere of desperation, conflicts exploded across the lands, and those fleeing the disaster turned on each other. In their desperation, they slaughtered one another, wielding their weapons against both friends and strangers alike. The lands were drenched in blood, the flames of destruction spreading to every corner. Both mortals and cultivators alike unleashed their darkest desires, and with nothing left to lose, they turned to violence in a last bid for survival. While this was not caused directly by the great calamity, it was certainly one of its effects. The calamity had shattered the very fabric of society, leading to an unprecedented collapse of order and morality. In this era of destruction, only the sects with earth immortals still stood a chance at resistance. The patriarch has arrived. The immortal Lord has come to save us. We pledge our eternal loyalty to the immortal Lord. Our sect will serve the immortal Lord forevermore. In the face of the calamity, even the earth immortal sects were soon besieged. Yet unlike lesser factions, these sects had earth immortals who descended from their sacred mountains to combat the disaster. In the face of the endless calamity chi, mighty figures strode across the sky, bearing their earth immortal lands like divine beings. With a mere wave of their hands, their domains might manifested, spanning thousands of miles, and in an instant it suppressed the chaos around them. Seeing this, billions of survivors sang their praises, countless factions wept with gratitude. In this great calamity, only earth immortals could provide salvation. Roar! Within the calamity chi, eerie shadows writhed and howled, but they were swiftly obliterated by the overwhelming force of the earth immortals' domains. While these malevolent entities were not individually strong, their sheer strangeness made them deadly. Only the primordial forces of an earth immortal's domain could suppress them. This was why, for millennia, the prophecy had foretold that only earth immortals could survive the great calamity. True immortals might possess strength, but in the face of such a calamity, they were but a drop in the ocean. Seal the gates for 3 days. Those who seek refuge shall have 3 days under the protection of the immortal sect. After suppressing the first wave of calamity chi with the power of their domains, the earth immortals of the major sects spoke in booming voices. Upon hearing this, the millions of beings who had found shelter were overwhelmed with gratitude, and no one dared to express dissatisfaction. In this great calamity, they had seen the horrors firsthand. To have even a moment's safety under the protection of an earth immortal was a blessing beyond measure. Chapter 1378, The Black Sea Calamity's Source, Return to the Alliance, Part 1. Chapter 1378, The Black Sea Calamity's Source, Return to the Alliance, Part 1. War and calamity spread across the immortal domain at an alarming rate, leaving no region untouched by its devastating reach. At this moment, within the western continent of the Xianxia immortal domain, the forces of the Loose Cultivator Alliance were in full operation, diligently preparing to resist the encroaching calamity. Thanks to Jiang Chengxuan's earlier instruction, all the factions associated with the alliance had already initiated preemptive measures, avoiding the chaos and confusion that often accompanied the sudden onset of disaster. Group Alpha, move all resources to the southwestern mountain range and prepare to activate the formation. Group Epsilon, swiftly withdraw all forces from the far north and consolidate the defense lines. Notify all factions allied with the alliance to gather the designated areas. Evacuate mortals within their territories and move them into protected formation zones. All immortal cities, fortify your positions. If necessary, use spatial formations to retreat back to the core sect. As the great calamity loomed, the entire loose cultivator alliance, under the leadership of Jiang Chengxuan's master Qin Shenwu, worked tirelessly. Alongside Qin Shenwu were his trusted aides, Feng Zhu and Elder Su, who together issued one order after another, ensuring that all forces were mobilized in preparation for the calamity. In the Grand Hall of the Alliance, fewer than 10 elders were present. The rest of the senior cultivators had been dispatched to their respective territories to monitor and address any unforeseen events. The flurry of commands emanating from the Alliance's headquarters reverberated throughout the Western continent, and millions upon millions of mortals and cultivators began seeking refuge under the Alliance's protection. In some remote immortal cities, the decision was made to abandon the region altogether, transporting valuable resources to safety. In closer settlements, mortals and lower-tier cultivators were evacuated, while stronger defensive formations were erected. Meanwhile, within the core regions, pre-assigned areas were used to house the displaced mortals and wandering cultivators. These zones were managed by factions that had long pledged allegiance to the loose cultivator alliance. Under Jiang Chengxuan's careful planning, the alliance operated like a well-oiled machine. Even as the calamity approached, there was no panic. The first wave of calamity Qi swept through the western continent with minimal losses. Only a few abandoned immortal cities and minor sects were consumed by the ominous forces. How does this look to you, Elder Yuanhen? In the midst of the Grand Hall, Qin Shenwu, having just finished issuing orders, turned to Yuanhen, an immortal elder seated nearby. The elder had returned recently from a critical mission. He had ventured to the western Black Sea to investigate the origins of the calamity and was now relaying crucial information. These arrangements are adequate, Yuanhen Immortal nodded solemnly. We can only hope that Chengxuan returns to the sect soon. The western Black Sea, where the calamity originated, should not reach us too quickly. The hall fell silent as Yuanhen's words echoed throughout the room. Everyone present had grave expressions, understanding the magnitude of the situation. The western Black Sea, a place Jiang Chengxuan had once visited and where he had found the primordial power, was now confirmed to be one of the epicenters of the disaster. When Jiang Chengxuan had ventured into the Black Sea, he had sensed that something far more ominous lay hidden in its depths. His intuition had been correct. Yuanhen, alongside an elder from the Earth Immortal sect, had delved deep into the Black Sea to investigate. They had faced unimaginable dangers, but what awaited them beyond the black waters was a colossal, sky-darkening monstrous tree, its roots entrenched in the fabric of reality itself. The sheer aura of this cursed tree was so overwhelming that even the two Earth Immortals were filled with dread. Realizing the implications, they retreated immediately, hurrying back to their sects to prepare for the calamity. Shortly after their departure, the cursed tree began to bear fruta euros, sinister red orbs resembling hearts that dropped into the Black Sea. These fruits gave rise to an army of calamity spirits, triggering waves of destruction across the Black Sea. The first to fall victim were the ancient sea monsters that ruled the waters. For several days, the once peaceful Black Sea turned into a blood-soaked battlefield. Towering waves of black surged skyward as the sea's rulers fought against the calamity spirits. But the calamity Qi only grew stronger, absorbing the sea's eerie powers and infecting the sea beasts with parasitic seeds from the cursed tree. The violence spiraled into endless slaughter. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the western continent, a vast beam of immortal light streaked across the sky at an incredible speed. Within the light was a figure whose expression remained calm, his gaze sweeping over the landscape below. As expected, the source of this great calamity isn't confined to just Lian Valley. This figure was none other than Jiang Chengxuan. With the power of his Earth Immortal domain, he had forced his way through the calamity's forces and claimed part of the treasure the cursed tree was guarding. Now he was racing back to the western continent. The moment he set foot in the western continent's territory, He could sense that the calamity's destructive will remained as potent as ever, a clear indication that the calamity was far from being confined to just one location. Suddenly, from the distant horizon, thick, churning black clouds rolled forward, crackling with violent red lightning. Massive waves of calamity chi surged, sweeping across the land like a tempest. This was the border between the western Black Sea and the western continent. Roar! In an instant, as Jiang Chengxuan returned to the western continent, he found himself confronted with an impending battle. Both for the sake of duty and the safety of his people, he knew he could not allow this calamity chi to ravage the western continent unchecked. Chapter 1379, The Black Sea Calamity Source, Return to the Alliance Part 2. Chapter 1379, The Black Sea Calamity Source, Return to the Alliance Part 2. Jiang Chengxuan did not retreat a single step. With immortal light surging from his body, he charged directly at the overwhelming tide of calamity energy. Huma Euros. Without a moment's hesitation, he unleashed the primordial waterfire sword. As it struck the calamity energy, a thunderous explosion echoed through the heavens. An endless blaze of fire erupted, accompanied by a roaring surge of tides, as red and blue galaxies emerged from thin air, spanning across the sky. The vast calamity energy, which loomed as deep as a black hole and as enormous as a mountain range, was instantly cleaved apart by the sword, as if splitting a mountain in two. One sword strike was enough to scatter a massive swath of calamity energy. What had appeared as an unstoppable force, before many immortal sects now, seemed trivial and insignificant in the face of Jiang Chengxuan's overwhelming might. Although the calamity energy was menacing and grotesque, it was but a force he could suppress with a single hand. Rora Euros. Rora Euros. However, it was far from over. The scale of this calamity surge was immense. In mere moments, the heavenly river that Jiang Chengxuan had carved through the energy was engulfed once again by the churning waves of black fog. The path ahead was entirely blocked by an endless mass of deep, sinister mist. Within that calamity energy, flashes of red lightning surged violently, and strange black shadows emerged like wandering ghosts, accompanied by eerie, soul-piercing wails. Yet Jiang Chengxuan remained unmoved, his mind steadfast, his heart free from distractions. Wielding his primordial waterfire sword, he conjured countless sword blossoms, transforming them into lotus flowers of primordial origin, piercing through the darkness and smashing into the eerie shadows. Boom! 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 In that instant, Jiang Chengxuan's assault ignited the calamity itself, as the primordial lotus flowers erupted, carving massive holes into the calamity energy. Within those gaps, the grotesque forms of the calamity spirits were revealed. Unlike the ones Jiang Chengxuan had encountered in Liyun Valley, these spirits were even more terrifying. These calamity spirits were massive, ghostly figures that darted through the calamity energy like deep-sea creatures swimming through the ocean. Their forms were ghastly, with jagged teeth and skin covered in grotesque folds, resembling a patchwork of different monstrous sea creatures crudely sewn together. Even their semi-transparent, semi-solid forms were enough to instill fear in anyone who laid eyes on them. Truly hideous, Jiang Chengxuan muttered to himself as he effortlessly cut them down. It was clear that these calamity spirits were intricately connected to the cursed tree from which they had been spawned, their grotesque forms a product of the energies they had absorbed. Yet this did nothing to sway Jiang Chengxuan's resolve. As the calamity spirits swarmed around him, his sword and the power of his earth immortal domain made him an unstoppable force, slicing through the grotesque forms and dissipating the calamity energy like a passing nightmare. Jiang Chengxuan entered a trance-like state of slaughter, his every move cleaving through the heavens and earth, determined to tear apart anything that stood in his path until the world was once again clear and calm. Days passed in this manner, and when the battle finally subsided, the once chaotic void was left in ruins. Jagged rifts in space, deep scars of the battle, and turbulent clouds of chaotic energy swirled throughout the shattered realm, like a desolate wasteland. But the once overwhelming calamity energy had vanished without a trace, and the monstrous calamity spirits were nowhere to be seen, completely obliterated. Jiang Chengxuan stood victorious, his feet planted firmly on his earth immortal domain, the primordial waterfire sword sheathed at his back. Seven-colored immortal light radiated from him, exuding an aura of profound wisdom and boundless might as he stood as the sole master of this devastated battlefield. With the relentless power of the primordial waterfire sword, Jiang Chengxuan had emerged as the undisputed victor of this conflict, crushing the calamity that had threatened to engulf the region. Hugh! He let out a slow breath, remaining composed as ever. He knew this battle was but one of the countless calamities yet to come. While this particular threat had been vanquished, it did little to change the overall course of events. Let's move on. With a flick of his wrist, a silvery light of spatial power surged from his body. With a single slash, he tore open the fabric of space and began his journey back to the loose cultivator alliance. Something is happening to the southwest. Calamity energy is about to erupt. Send reinforcements immediately. We must suppress it. Not far from where Jiang Chengxuan had vanquished the calamity, a group of cultivators hurried toward the scene. They were dressed in the garb of the loose cultivator alliance, and at the helm was none other than Red Blade Immortal, one of Jiang Chengxuan's trusted allies, whom he had brought back from the southern stone forest. The group's expressions were solemn, their energies at their peak, and their immortal treasures glowing with brilliance, ready for battle. They had received word of a potential calamity outbreak in the area, dispatched by Elder Yuanhen and others to investigate. If they could suppress the calamity, all the better. If not, their priority was to relay the information back to the Alliance. The task ahead of them was daunting, as the calamity energy was known for its overwhelming force. In the past, they had relied on Earth immortal protection to avoid such threats. But now, with the calamity upon them, there was no escape. The calamity was something they would have to face head-on. Wait, am I seeing things? The calamity energy, it's disappearing. One of the loose cultivator alliance elders, his voice filled with astonishment, cried out, his words immediately drawing the attention of the others. Several of the other elders glared at him, skeptical of his claim. How could the calamity energy, which was still so menacing, suddenly vanish? Another elder furrowed his brow and spoke sternly, Elder Chen, do not jest at a time like this. The calamity may be terrifying, but if we do not face it, what will become of our sect? You can't possibly be thinking of backing out now. Elder Chen, realizing the gravity of the situation, stammered, I swear it's true. I'm not lying nor shirking my duty. If you don't believe me, check for yourselves. The others, still uncertain, extended their spiritual senses to investigate. Moments later, they gasped in disbelief. Even the usually composed Red Blade Immortal was left speechless. Could it be that we received false information? Or is there some unknown factor at play? She wondered, her mind racing with unease. Calamity energy was far too insidious to simply vanish. Its sudden disappearance could signal something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Let's return to the sect immediately and report this to Elder Yuanhen. But before they could take action, a familiar voice echoed from the void, freezing them in their tracks. Elders, what brings you here with such urgency? The voice sent shockwaves through the group, and they turned, their eyes wide with disbelief. Elder Jiang. Jiang Chengxuan descended from the sky, his immortal form radiating power as he approached the group. Instinctively, they all bowed and greeted him. Welcome back, Elder Jiang. We are most fortunate to see you again, they exclaimed, their voices trembling with awe. Jiang Chengxuan smiled gently and motioned for them to rise. No need for formalities. Tell me what brings you here. Red Blade Immortal stepped forward, explaining, we received reports of a calamity outbreak. But before she could finish, it dawned on her. Could it be Elder Jiang has already dealt with it? The realization struck the group like lightning, and they marveled at Jiang Chengxuan's prowess. Jiang Chengxuan chuckled softly and nodded, confirming their suspicions. The elders breathed a collective sigh of relief, their respect for Jiang Chengxuan reaching new heights. In such a short time, he had suppressed a calamity. It was a testament to his unparalleled strength, and the group's admiration for him deepened. Chapter 1380, Uplifting Spirits, The Black Wall's Transformation, Part 1. Chapter 1380, Uplifting Spirits, The Black Wall's Transformation, Part 1. Jiang Elder has returned. Jiang Elder and Elder Shen are back. Within the gates of the Loose Cultivator Alliance, joyful cries broke the long silence. From the vast sect grounds to the grand halls, countless disciples and elders were shaken by the news and rushed out to greet them. In an instant, the once quiet sect grounds became a hub of excitement and chatter. Amidst the chaos of the great calamity, with the hearts of the people wavering, even within the loose cultivator alliance, the return of Jiang Chengxuan brought a sense of stability and hope. His name alone seemed to carry a magical power that calmed the anxiety of countless disciples and elders alike. Chengxuan, you're back. Ryan, it's such a relief to see you're safe. Friend Chengxuan, now that the great calamity is upon us, we could not rest easy without your presence. As the crowd parted, the figures of Qin Shenwu, Elder Su, and Yuanhen Immortal quickly made their way through, their faces lit with joy. At the center of everyone's attention, several figures descended from the sky. Everyone, thank you for waiting. Yang Chengxuan's clear voice cut through the air as he and Shen Ryan, along with the others, made their return. After encountering Red Blade Immortal and the rest, Jiang Chengxuan took the opportunity to gather everyone and make their way back to the sect together. The sight of over a dozen immortals, each radiating powerful immortal light as they entered the sect, immediately sent waves of cheering among the disciples. In the midst of the great calamity, strength was the only true reassurance. Now, with Jiang Chengxuan and the high-ranking elders returning in unison, it was like a stabilizing force had descended upon the alliance. Even in the face of looming danger, with such a formidable group of immortals, their chances of survival seemed much greater. The elders have returned. Our loose cultivator alliance will surely survive this calamity. Yes, if the elders are safe, we have nothing to fear. With the power of our alliance, we have nothing to fear, even in the face of the great calamity. Amid the noise, many disciples began to excitedly discuss the return of the elders, their spirits lifted. Gazing up at Jiang Chengxuan's figure in the sky, the admiration in their hearts grew. This scene was exactly as Jiang Chengxuan had intended. His grand return was meant to reassure and unite the sect. After exchanging pleasantries with Qin Shenwu and Yuanhen Immortal, Jiang Chengxuan stood at the center of the grand sect square. He raised his voice, firm and resonant, addressing the gathered disciples and elders. Disciples of the Loose Cultivator Alliance, esteemed elders. The great calamity has descended upon the immortal realm. The outside world is in ruin, with countless lives lost and destruction everywhere you look. But I urge you all not to panic, and above all, not to fear. We have prepared thoroughly for this calamity. No matter the danger, if we stand united, we will weather the storm and see the light of day once more. All of you, elders and disciples alike, will face trials. Even I will face them. But rest assured, the power of the Loose Cultivator Alliance will not abandon a single disciple. Yang Chengxuan's powerful and sincere words echoed throughout the vast sect, uplifting the spirits of every disciple and elder present. To them, the words of an earth immortal were like a divine decree. And coming from Jiang Chengxuan, the protector of the Loose Cultivator Alliance, his words carried even more weight. In an instant, many of the disciples and elders were moved to tears, their hearts ablaze with resolve. They clenched their fists and began to shout in unison. The Loose Cultivator Alliance will stand united. Together, we will survive the great calamity. The Loose Cultivator Alliance will stand united. Together, we will survive the great calamity. The Loose Cultivator Alliance will stand united. Together, we will survive the great calamity. The chorus of voices grew louder and louder, reaching the heavens. The sight was enough to bring comfort even to Jiang Chengxuan and the other elders, who nodded in satisfaction. After some further instruction, Jiang Chengxuan waved the crowd off and returned to his cave to rest. Meanwhile, across the various realms of the immortal domain, the great calamity was becoming more violent, sweeping across the land. In the blink of an eye, several centuries had passed, flowing like a river. These few hundred years were perhaps the most brutal in the history of the immortal domain. Under the shadow of the great calamity, disaster swept across the realms, with countless lives lost. Eerie trees took root in many of the sacred lands, spreading calamity energy and destruction. Nearly half of the immortal domain was enveloped in calamity energy, turning vast territories into desolate wastelands. In those lands, the thick calamity energy condensed into strange black walls, towering into the sky and stretching across the universe, forming barriers as solid as cities. These walls were not inert. They expanded slowly outward each day, devouring more and more land. Behind the walls, countless calamity spirits swarmed like bees from a hive, forming dark clouds that blotted out the sky as they assaulted the remaining strongholds, plundering resources. At this moment, in the Grand Hall of the Tianlong Merchant Guild in the Western Continent, Elder Fuguang, the Calamity Spirit Army is approaching again. A voice, tired and anxious, came from outside, interrupting the proceedings within the hall. Seated behind a long table piled high with reports was the figure of Elder Fuguang. Hearing the news, his expression turned grim, tinged with a certain numbness as he looked up. Calamity spirits euros. This term had become synonymous with fear and unrest ever since the Great Calamity began. Chapter 1381, Uplifting Spirits, the Black Wall's Transformation, Part 2. Chapter 1381, Uplifting Spirits, the Black Wall's Transformation, Part 2. These calamity spirits, born from the roots of the sinister trees within the source of the calamity energy, were almost devoid of thought euros, driven solely by an insatiable desire for destruction. Over the centuries, the cultivators had slaughtered tens of thousands of them each, yet with every outbreak, their numbers showed no signs of diminishing. "Let's move." Without hesitation, Elder Fuguang ordered his subordinates. Over the past few centuries, under the relentless assault of the calamity, the Tianlong Merchant Guild had ceased most of its trade. Like many other factions within the immortal domain, they had resorted to holding their territory, hoping to survive the calamity or face eventual destruction. Only high-ranking factions with Earth immortal protectors could even consider defending themselves. Mid-tier forces had long been wiped out. Those who remained were either top-tier forces or those allied with them. As these thoughts ran through Fuguang Immortal's mind, he reached the edge of the sect, standing atop the city wall. From there, he could see the distant horizon darken as a wave of calamity energy surged forward. Beyond that, he could glimpse a vast, impenetrable black curtain euros, the black wall formed from calamity energy. "It's getting closer," Fuguang murmured to himself. The black wall had advanced from the western sea of darkness, pushing relentlessly forward over the centuries, encroaching upon the western continent. Nothing could penetrate its depths, and no one who ventured inside had ever returned. Rumors had circulated that several Earth immortal sects, located too close to the calamity's source, had been forced to abandon their ancestral lands when the full calamity erupted. Even Earth immortals had been unable to suppress the eerie power of the black wall. "Activate." With a shout, Fuguang Immortal raised his hand, and a radiant celestial parasol appeared above him, spinning as it grew to a towering size, spanning hundreds of miles. Lightning and storms surged from beneath it, unleashing tremendous power that rained down upon the incoming calamity energy. In response, countless calamity spirits burst forth from the rolling black energy, howling and throwing themselves into battle with reckless abandon. What followed was yet another battle in the seemingly endless war against the calamity. The earth shook, the sky cracked, and only after fierce combat did the forces of the calamity finally dissipate. The outcome was predictable euros. Using the power of his Earth immortal domain, Fuguang Immortal successfully subdued the disaster. "Clean up the battlefield and check for any lingering threats," Fuguang Immortal said wearily as he prepared to leave. However, just as he turned, one of the elders called out in alarm. "Elder Fuguang, look over there, euros, what's that?" Fuguang Immortal, startled by the elder's tone, looked back, fearing another disaster had begun. But to his relief, the elder wasn't pointing at a new calamity, but at something unusual in the distance beneath the black wall. Far in the distance, beneath the ominous black curtain, a massive sphere of glowing light pulsed intermittently, accompanied by the sound of thunder. A terrifying power surged from the light, accompanied by strange phenomena that rippled through the heavens. "That's primordial power," Fuguang Immortal muttered in astonishment. The sight before him indicated that at least one Earth immortal was engaged in combat beneath the black wall. Who would dare fight so close to the black wall? Fuguang Immortal wondered, deeply puzzled. That was one of the most dangerous places in the immortal domain, close to the source of the calamity. Earth immortal-level calamity spirits could appear there at any time, and several Earth immortals had already perished in the calamity. The infamous Skyfall Immortal had not been the only Earth immortal to fall. In the face of the calamity's terrifying power, numerous Earth immortals had met their end, either caught off guard or overwhelmed by the calamity's strange abilities. In one infamous incident, a calamity puppet born from an Earth immortal's corpse had wiped out nearly 100 immortal sects and claimed the lives of billions of mortals and cultivators. Only through the combined efforts of three powerful factions had they managed to trap and destroy the puppet, averting further catastrophe. But even that wasn't the last time such a calamity puppet appeared. It was said that those who were assimilated by the calamity, including true immortals, could transform into even more fearsome beings pseudo-worth immortal puppets of terror. Thus, the Black Wall had become the most dangerous forbidden zone in the immortal domain. For anyone, even an Earth immortal, to venture near it now was a reckless and perilous act. Someone's fighting the calamity, but this is no ordinary battle. What should we do? Fuguang Immortal muttered, torn between action and caution. He couldn't recklessly rush to aid them, as doing so would risk the survival of his entire guild. But ignoring it would weigh heavily on his conscience. After a moment of thought, he made his decision. There's only one person I can ask. With that, Fuguang Immortal took off, not toward the main hall, but flying directly toward the heart of the Western continent. Soon, beyond the gates of the loose Cultivator Alliance, Fuguang Immortal passed through layers of protective wards and found himself standing before Jiang Chengxuan. Respected elder, it has been too long. What brings you here today? Jiang Chengxuan asked as he stepped out of the grand hall, his expression curious. Fuguang Immortal wasted no time, immediately recounting the strange events he had just witnessed. Hearing the description, Jiang Chengxuan's face darkened, his brows furrowing in concern. The combination of an Earth immortal and the Black Wall made the situation dire. For centuries, Jiang Chengxuan had remained within the loose Cultivator Alliance, safeguarding it from countless calamities. Yet even he had never encountered something like this before. Let's go. I'll come with you to investigate. Without hesitation, Jiang Chengxuan made his decision. In a flash, he and Fuguang Immortal transformed into two beams of light, speeding toward the calamity's source. At the edge of the Western continent, beneath the Black Wall, the sky was darkened by a storm of swirling calamity energy. The very laws of heaven and earth were twisted beyond recognition, chaos erupting from the void and spiraling into massive storms. Calamity spirits, countless in number, filled the sky, their grotesque forms twisting and writhing. In the midst of this apocalyptic scene, a patch of land remained protected, an island of light in the chaos. Celestial radiance illuminated the sky, and countless cultivators stood upon the island, their figures flickering as they wielded treasures and unleashed divine powers to battle the swarming calamity spirits. Boom! 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 Thunderous explosions echoed across the battlefield as red lightning and auroras ripped through the sky, carving deep rifts into the fabric of space itself. Damn these calamity spirits! I'll take you all down with me. One of the cultivators roared as they charged into the fray, only to be met by the relentless howls of the spirits. The battle was fierce, with countless lives lost by the minute. Despite the overwhelming odds, the island's defenders pressed on, their focus unwavering. Above the island, the Earth Immortal who led them focused intently on the Black Wall, where the true enemy awaited. Buzz! Suddenly, a crack opened in the Black Wall, and from within emerged a sinister tree, growing rapidly as it absorbed the surrounding chaos. The air became thick with its foul aura, and even the Earth Immortals standing below felt a tremor of fear. Chapter 1382, The Calamity of Qingyun, More Allies, Part 1. Chapter 1382, The Calamity of Qingyun, More Allies, Part 1. Mysterious Tree. The Earth Immortal muttered the name, his expression growing more solemn by the second. Ever since the great calamity descended upon the immortal realm, the name, Mysterious Tree, had become the most feared entity in existence. No one knew where it had come from, but it was the source of all the calamity energy. Its eerie powers were so potent that even Earth Immortals could be controlled, turned into puppets for its malevolent will. The tree could endlessly siphon the spiritual energy of the heavens, converting it into calamity energy, which in turn unleashed unending disasters and summoned hordes of calamity spirits. Its terrifying might was beyond comprehension. In the blink of an eye, as dark clouds gathered and the mysterious tree's body swelled to cover the sky, a stifling aura descended upon the battlefield. The cultivators fighting the calamity spirits within the Earth Immortals' domain felt a sharp pain stab through their souls, and the already desperate battle grew even more perilous. Awaken! The Earth Immortal knew the situation was dire. Without hesitation, He unleashed his full power, his divine light erupting like a radiant rainbow, shaking the void and shattering the suppressive forces surrounding him. He had waited for this momenta euros, the appearance of the mysterious tree. Instantly, his hands formed a series of seals, summoning the power of his earth immortal domain. Divine light surged upward, transforming into rivers of celestial energy that stretched across the sky. The power of his domain, infused with his essence, created a clear and pure heaven above. Behind him, mighty illusions manifested, as if entire worlds were appearing in the void. A gleaming glass spear materialized in his hands, growing to a towering height in the blink of an eye before piercing the sky. His battle-intent sword, rising to the heavens. Even the other cultivators fighting the calamity spirits felt a surge of courage and strength, their blood boiling with renewed vigor as they watched the Earth Immortal's display of power. Boom! Under the shattering sky, thunder roared and the galaxy spread out in brilliance. The Earth Immortal, consumed by killing intent, engaged the mysterious tree in a furious battle. His spear, imbued with celestial energy, slashed through the void, while the mysterious tree's branches multiplied and spread like countless tendrils of black light, weaving a web to ensnare him. The clash of primordial powers erupted in an instant, with tens of thousands of collisions occurring in the blink of an eye. Explosions of devastating force tore through the battlefield, creating waves of destruction and sending arcs of lightning through the chaos. The power of an Earth Immortal could shake the heavens and the earth, causing the entire immortal land to tremble under the force of their battle. This peak confrontation would determine the fate of everyone involved. Every attack was meticulously calculated, with the Earth Immortal focusing all his attention, knowing that a single mistake could mean disaster. However, this Placia Euros, so close to the Black Walla Euros, was the very heart of the calamity. Under its influence, the power of the mysterious tree grew stronger, seemingly endless. Tendrils of calamity energy shot out from the tree's swaying form, and even the Earth Immortal's domain could not withstand a direct hit. The tree's sinister abilities came into full view. Black calamity energy condensed into countless shadowy weapons, aiming for the Earth Immortal's vital points. Calamity energy ripped through the air, tearing the sky apart. The Earth Immortal's divine spear severed branch after branch, but each time one was destroyed, more grew in its place. The fight quickly reached a fever pitch, with the situation growing more dangerous by the second. The mysterious tree's power was something few Earth Immortals could resist. Worse still, this particular Earth Immortal had lived for centuries and was no longer at his peak strength. His glory days had long since passed. Is this the end of my sect? Black lightning swirled into a massive storm, sealing off all avenues of escape. The Earth Immortal's eyes burned red with rage, his heart filled with bitterness. He had prepared everything to flee with his entire sect to this hidden place, hoping to evade the calamity, yet they had still been found. Now, with the mysterious tree looming over them, it seemed there was no way out. The residual shockwaves from his battle had already shaken the foundations of his domain, dimming the protective light. In the chaos, countless disciples and elders had been devoured by the relentless calamity spirits, their cries of pain echoing across the battlefield. Even he, an Earth Immortal, wasn't sure if he could escape. Amidst the intense battle, the mysterious tree's branches had extended thousands of miles, slowly trapping him within its web. Boom! 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 The tree unleashed its power again. Thousands of black tendrils twisted through the air, firing beams of black light that shattered the space around him. The tendrils came from every direction, a net of death closing in. The Earth Immortal cursed silently, forced to summon the last remnants of his domain's power to create a protective barrier. If he didn't, the resulting devastation would wipe out what remained of his sect. The mysterious tree was cunning. Throughout the battle, it had used this tactic multiple times, forcing the Earth Immortal to divert his attention and sacrifice precious energy to protect his people. Boom! As the shockwave dissipated, the Earth Immortal's aura flickered. He was clearly weakening, his energy nearly depleted. If he didn't break free soon, this would be his final stand. Yet even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, he couldn't bring himself to abandon the thousands of disciples still fighting below. He could not flee alone, leaving them to their fates. Even if he did escape, where would he go? The entire world had become a wasteland. Determined, the old Earth Immortal's eyes flashed with madness, as he prepared to make a final desperate attack, betting everything on one last chance for survival. But just as he was about to risk it all, an unexpected aura suddenly appeared behind him. Buzz! A wave of strange energy burst forth. A flood of multicolored celestial light surged across the sky, tearing apart the prison of branches the mysterious tree had created. Everyone on the battlefield froze, their eyes turning skyward in disbelief. Chapter 1383, The Calamity of Qingyun More Allies Part 2. Chapter 1383, The Calamity of Qingyun More Allies Part 2. Two figures, carrying the power of their Earth immortal domains, descended like divine saviors into the battlefield. It's you, Old Man Lan. How did you end up in such dire straits? We're not too late, are we? The exhausted Earth immortal elder looked back, and his vision cleared. Standing before him were none other than the familiar figures of Jiang Chengxuan and immortal Fuguang. Even though he had lived for countless millennia, a mist of emotion clouded his eyes, a sense of immense relief swelling within him. In the face of impending doom, nothing could feel more exhilarating than this moment of salvation. Fuguang, Chengxuan, Helaza, I guess I'm not destined to die today. The Earth immortal elder's worn face lit up with a joyous smile, his laughter filled with renewed hope. Jiang Chengxuan and immortal Fuguang quickly joined him, standing side by side, ready for battle. Let's talk later. First, let's get you and your people out of here. Jiang Chengxuan's gaze swept over the shattered mountains and rivers of the elder's domain, stained with blood, and his tone grew serious. This elder was none other than the same Earth immortal, who had taken Xuanhen immortal with him after the Earth immortal trading convention. Good. I, on behalf of the Qingyun immortal sect, owe both of you an immense debt of gratitude. The elder gratefully clasped his hands in salute without a trace of hesitation. His body surged with celestial energy as he drove it into his domain, forcefully driving the horde of calamity spirits out, blasting them into the skies. He then swiftly began maneuvering his Earth immortal domain, pushing it towards the western border of Zizhu, attempting to lead his surviving disciples and elders to safety. However, the mysterious tree would not allow such an escape so easily. As the elder made his move, countless black tendrils shot out like venomous serpents, infused with calamity energy, aiming to block their path. But this time, the elder was not fighting alone. Jiang Chengxuan and immortal Fuguang stepped in, using their immense powers to hold back the tree's assault. The two Earth immortals unleashed their domains, with Jiang Chengxuan shining in a brilliant spectrum of colors, and immortal Fuguang's radiant with golden light. In an instant, their combined powers illuminated the dark sky, obliterating the mysterious tree's energy. Even the roots and tendrils anchoring the prison of black energy were torn apart, opening a path for the Qingyun immortal sect's escape. This moment, like the breaking of dawn, sent a shudder of hope through the hearts of the remaining disciples of the Qingyun immortal sect. Tears welled up in their eyes as they fought back their emotions. The battle had been brutal, with countless friends and family falling before their eyes, consumed by calamity spirits and transformed into mindless puppets. And with the descent of the mysterious tree, it seemed as though all hope was lost, even their Earth immortal elder forced into a desperate struggle. They had believed they would perish under the weight of the calamity. But in this moment of life and death, two Earth immortals had appeared, turning the tide and offering salvation. We're saved, we're finally saved. Senior brother, senior sister, I'm still alive. Master, hold on just a little longer. We're going to make it out. Throughout the battlefield, the surviving disciples cried tears of joy, calling out to one another. Even the elders of the Qingyun immortal sect, battered and bruised, could hardly believe their fortune, their faces filled with relief and awe. As they stood in the blood-soaked remains of the battlefield, they gazed up towards the heavens. Jiang Chengxuan and immortal Fuguang were now fully engaged in a fierce confrontation with the mysterious tree. Boom! 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 Mysterious dark energy flashed across the sky, slithering like serpents from all directions. Immortal Fuguang's expression grew stern as his treasure, a golden umbrella, expanded into a radiant shield, slicing through the darkness with sharp beams of golden light. The closer they got to the black wall, the more immortal Fuguang realized how much stronger the calamity energy was here. The energy here was far more potent than the calamity plagues that had struck various regions of the immortal realm. He felt a chill of dread, but also relief that he had brought Jiang Chengxuan with him instead of coming alone. Beside him, Jiang Chengxuan appeared far more composed. His seven-colored celestial wheel spun behind him like a divine halo, effortlessly repelling the calamity energy that tried to encroach upon him. His Teichu water-fire sword glowed with immense power, slicing through the air with strikes that summoned flames and waves of primordial energy. With every swing of his sword, Jiang Chengxuan summoned mighty primordial forces, burning through the void and cutting through the mysterious tree's tendrils. Roar! Roar! Even the calamity spirits, previously so fearsome, dared not approach, content to bellow from a distance. It was clear that Jiang Chengxuan alone was enough to suppress the mysterious tree's powers and the dark forces within this part of the world. Red lightning and streams of fire and water filled the sky, causing the heavens themselves to tremble. The impact of the battle was so powerful that even those far away in the scattered sects of Zizhu could sense its ripples. They've already retreated. Let's follow them out, Jiang Chengxuan said after a few moments, his voice calm as he split open the chaotic void with a wave of his hand. He and immortal Fuguang then transformed into streaks of light and flew toward the safety of Zizhu, leaving the devastated battlefield behind. Several days later, in the grand hall of the scattered Immortal Alliance, numerous elders had gathered. Among them were some new faces, clad in blue robes, representatives of the Qingyun Immortal sect. Qingyun Sovereign, the immediate danger has passed, but could you explain what happened to your sect? We need to understand fully, Jiang Chengxuan's voice echoed in the hall, calm yet commanding. Sitting at the head of the assembly, Jiang Chengxuan's question drew everyone's attention, their eyes fixed on the Qingyun Sovereign, their expressions filled with curiosity and concern. With a long sigh, the Qingyun Sovereign began to recount their tale. Our sect was located over 10,000 miles west of the Black Sea. But now, that entire region is overrun with mysterious trees and saturated with calamity energy. It has become a wasteland. His words sent a cold shiver through everyone present, their faces turning grim. When the calamity began, the mysterious trees appeared, absorbing the very essence of heaven and earth. Even Earth immortal domains struggle to resist. The source of the calamity in Zizhu is located deep within the Black Sea, a place already fraught with danger but rich in resources. Over the last few centuries, the mysterious trees have consumed the strange and potent energies of the Black Sea, growing exponentially stronger. Eventually, they crossed the sea and reached our sect. And so, I led the entire sect in a desperate attempt to break through. But we ran into more mysterious trees on the way. As his story ended, the hall fell silent, everyone absorbing the gravity of the situation. The realization that Zizhu's source of calamity had been festering in the Black Sea for centuries sent a wave of dread through the room. Even Jiang Chengxuan, normally calm and composed, felt a twinge of alarm. Indeed, this calamity is far more dire than we first imagined, Immortal Fuguang finally said, breaking the silence. Jiang Chengxuan nodded gravely. We need to gather more information before we can formulate a plan to deal with this. He then turned to the Qingyun Sovereign. Qingyun Sovereign, if your sect has nowhere else to go, I offer you refuge within the scattered Immortal Alliance. What say you? The Qingyun Sovereign, deeply grateful, bowed his head in thanks. I am eternally grateful for your generosity, Jiang Sovereign. The Qingyun Immortal sect will gladly align itself with your alliance and offer whatever assistance we can. With this agreement, the Qingyun Immortal sect had formally joined the scattered Immortal Alliance, strengthening their bonds and increasing their numbers in the face of the looming calamity.